is upon us, and this is, I just saw Scotty Johnston in the hallway. Scotty Johnston, the producer, behind-the-scenes extraordinaire, kind of the brains of the fan. And I was saying to Scotty, I said, it's interesting. This is kind of like the last day of, and when I say the treading of water, that comes off the wrong way. That diminishes what we've done in radio for the last couple of months. But clearly, in terms of, it is crazy to think this is the last weekend before it is here in earnest, the National Football League season. And as I always say, clearly summer has ended. Then you blink your eyes, and before you know it, you're scraping your windshield. But nonetheless, it is upon us. And it will be the Colts and the Miami Dolphins coming up a week from this Sunday at Lucas Oil Stadium. We have plenty to talk about with that. We also have the fact that it is, and you can feel it, like there's something about the air this time of year when you transition into the autumn where you go from the hot humidity and into like just kind of the cooler, thinner air, and it just looks cleaner. The air just looks cleaner without all the humidity in it. And it feels that way. I just stepped outside, ran next door to get something, was in here early this morning, and it feels like it's late September, early October. Hopefully the warm weather, we do get some more of that back. But nonetheless, Eddie's walking around with his pumpkin spice chai tea. Although today I brought him in some of the Java House Peel and Pour to see what he thinks of it.
Yeah, no pumpkin spice chai tea today, Jake.
Okay. Well, you got the Java House there. We've got high school football now going. Kyle Nedrip going to join us on the show today. And a couple of big ones in college football. Obviously, last night, great game between your alma mater, UIndy, and Marion. And I love seeing – what's that?
Roll Hounds.
The Hounds did get the win yesterday over Marion. And then this weekend, you have Purdue kicking off. You have Indiana Old Dominion. The two big on the national scale. I don't think anything's bigger than Texas, Ohio State. And that does have some local interest and cachet just because of the Arch Manning intrigue and factor with it. So there's a lot going on, and it is fun. And I feel like what we need to do now in terms of the Colts is just kind of turn the page from all the uncertainty, all the doubt. And, yes, I think that there are a lot of Colts fans that feel like we became spoiled by this routine. We became spoiled by this routine that every year it was like they are going to be a top-flight team in their division. I mean, and I'm talking 10 years ago. But even with that, when Andrew Luck retired and you still felt like, well, they're just a quarterback away once they get that quarterback. And then when they drafted Richardson, there was excitement and reason to follow along and et cetera. And all of it now feels like kind of back to 1985 all over again. Of, hey, we have some good players. John Hand is a good player. Johnny Cooks is a good player. Albert Bentley's a good player. Billy Brooks is a good player. When I say 85, I mean some of those guys were later than that. But, Dwayne Beckett's a good player. But we just don't know about the quarterback. Is it Mike Pagel? Is it Art Schlichter? Is it, Don Mikowski? Is it Craig Erickson? Is it Steve Walsh? Is it eventually, is Jeff George going to grow into it? Is it Chris Chandler? And just that rotation, it feels like we're back there. But they do have a quarterback that gives you some stability in Daniel Jones, hopefully. And is he going to wow you, blow you away? Probably not. But they have a good roster around him. And if they have a good roster around him, then does that mean that he simply, if he keeps his hands on the wheel, can keep things where they need to go and make plays elsewhere? And we've seen it. We've seen it with some teams where you say, okay, this is a good roster, and they just simply need to not – what did Booger McFarland say yesterday? Don't turn the ball over. Just do not turn the ball over, and you're going to be okay. And I think it is, yes, if they go out against Miami and they, for like the 74th consecutive year, lose a season opener, then we can start to discuss it and panic and whatever else. But right now, clean slate. The Etch-a-Sketch is wiped clean. And so, therefore, we're going to hope spring eternal, or in this case, early fall spring eternal, or late summer spring eternal. Now, this time of year also, one of the things that I have talked about, if you know me and you listen to this show, last night, for example, today is Shannon's birthday. Happy birthday to Shannon. The lovely, the beautiful, the always effervescent Shannon Walsh, birthday today. Happy birthday to Shannon. We went out last night for dinner and walked in, had a beer at Flatwater, and up walks Kip, and he says, I want to buy Shannon a beer for her birthday. And I said, well, the happiest of birthdays, right? And if you know me, as Kip was talking about, we're just sitting there shooting the bull. And he's like, yeah, I just love the fact that, like, you know, you're all things Indiana. You're always talking about and promoting Indiana and things in Indiana and the events of Indianapolis. And I have always said that when you look at the calendar of events in this town, and we're getting set for the NFL season, and the NBA season then starts, 6 weeks after that, and the Pacers were just in the finals, and, the month of May and all of that. One of the crown jewel events of this town that if you have never been, and it's one of the crown jewel events because you don't have to be a diehard or a regular of this event to go and immediately be wowed. It is one of those things that no one goes just once. You go one time and you feel, and I'm talking about sensory overload, you feel the senses, you smell the senses, you see the senses of the always awesome U.S. Nationals, which is the top event for the NHRA, and it is back once again here in Central Indiana. The Cornwell Quality Tools, as a matter of fact, U.S. Nationals, and that means, as also has become a tradition, that we get one of those who goes faster than anybody with that power that I'm talking about. And joining us in studio is Brittany Force. Brittany, it is a pleasure to see you once again. Welcome back to Indianapolis.
Hi, thanks for having me.
This is, and I think you would agree with everything I just said, and maybe some of this is circular conversation from a year ago, but when you get out there, and I don't, the Top Fuel, it goes without saying, the power and the speed. I mean, you have set, as a matter of fact, I'm going to ask you right now, do you know the top speed that you've set?
Yes, of course I do. 343.16 miles per hour.
That is correct. I have it written down right here, my cheat sheet, 343.16, which is, again, when you see it and you see that kind of speed, and I realize that you're not doing that on every single run, but nonetheless, to the naked eye, those speeds all pretty much look the same. But the power and the force of what you guys do, there is nobody that can go out to that and see it just once, right?
Oh, absolutely not. I've brought in friends out before. I've had, fans that come up to me and said they've never been before, and they are all hooked. When you get out there and you see these Top Fuel cars, funny cars launch down this racetrack, 330 miles per hour, less than 4 seconds, over 11,000 horsepower. There's nothing like that. You can't see that anywhere else. It is the most extreme sport.
And the thing that's funny to me, you hear this a lot, and obviously you were introduced to the sport as a lot of us were. One thing that you have in common, I think, with so many people is the reality is that your father, John Force, introduced so many people transcendently to the sport just because of his passion and energy for promoting the sport. And so you get involved in the sport theoretically at a very young age, but you've been around it your whole life, right? And people ask this question of, well, are they really athletes? They just sit there and they go down. I would imagine that the G's alone, what is the physical conditioning or requirement for you to be in that car at that kind of a speed?
I do a lot physical training, just, prepping for an event. I have a simulator in my lounge out on the road at home that I sit in and just go through the routines, just repetition to get me more comfortable for when I'm back in the seat. Outside of that, I'm big on, I know this sounds crazy, yoga sounds opposite, but it teaches you how to quiet your mind, quiet the noise in your mind, and how to focus on breathing, which is very important, when you're pulling 6 G's in one of these things. And also I work with a martial arts instructor on eye-hand coordination, reaction training. I do a lot. I put in the work. I feel, I need to, when I feel my best and I'm working out and eating right, I feel like I do my best job when I'm in the car. So there's a lot that goes into it. Drivers do things differently. I've had guys, I know guys out there that were big video game guys, played video games. I wish I would have gotten that at a younger age because I feel like that could be helpful too. Again, it's just that reaction time.
What other sports, by the way, do you watch or follow? I realize that over the course of the summer, you're running around doing the NHRA and driving your top fuel. You're fifth in points right now, if I'm not mistaken. So you're right there in the mix. But what other sports do you get a chance to follow or to look at athletes where you might marvel what they do the way they do what you do?
I get to go because of being sponsored by Monster. I get to go to PBR, which I never thought that would be my thing. I didn't think I'd ever be into it, and it's one of my favorite events to go to. I usually go once or twice a year. PBR,
Professional bull riders,
yes,
right?
professional bull riding. Supercross. My brother-in-law is an IndyCar, but our sport takes up so much time. Our season is so long. I don't get much time to do anything outside of that.
Your brother-in-law, by the way, for those that are not aware, but I think most are, is Graham Rahal.
Mhm.
Okay, I remember when you set some speed. Graham, I think probably at least once a weekend hears from people about the speeds that you're setting elsewhere, right? How much do you guys kind of match wits on? Are there similarities between being in an Indy car and being in, a top fuel dragster?
I think the biggest similarity is he says he would never climb into a top fuel car, and I said I would never get into an Indy car. And that is the biggest thing. What you do is crazy. No, what you do is crazy.
You know what? He's crazy because there's 32 others around him.
Yeah.
Right? You're crazy just because of the complete breakaway speed of it, and you're always riding on the edge. And in any walk of life, I think testing oneself is a good thing, but you do it every single time you strap in.
Mm-hmm.
How does one get that mindset?
That's one of the toughest parts about the job is getting in that right mindset, especially on race day. There's so much noise going through your head. You want to perform well. You're thinking about, I'm in this lane that has a bump out at 600 feet. I want lane choice for the next round. There's so many things going through your head, and really it's trying to eliminate that all, and it's all reaction. So it's getting to that mentality where you're on autopilot. You're not thinking, you're just reacting.
It's funny when you look at the NHRA, by the way, U.S. Nationals are taking place this weekend. We'll get you all of the information for it. Monster Energy, when you see that, and then you see the huge flames coming out of the back of it, that's Brittany Force that's getting ready to hopefully exceed, 340 miles an hour, for example. But when you look at the forms of racing that takes place, now I'm going to take the bikes out of it, but in terms of the cars itself, top fuel dragsters, obviously pro stock, funny car, all of them. Is it a different skill set from one to the other, or is it kind of translatable and transferable for you to get in if you were to try one of the different disciplines aside from a top fuel?
There's definitely both similarities and differences. I've always been a top fuel girl. I drove, Super Comp A Fuel in the sportsman division for 6 years before I went pro into a top fuel car. But I got licensed years ago in a funny car. It is a whole different animal. It is a whole different beast. It's that really short wheelbase where you have the engine now sitting in your lap and trying to steer that thing. I mean, just doing the burnout, I was all over the place because I'm used to dragsters with that long wheelbase. It takes time for the car to catch up to itself, and I feel safer with the engine behind me. So half the time when it blows up, I don't realize how bad it is until I see photos or videos of it later. But when it's happening in your lap, that scares the hell out of me. I like a top fuel car. Again, I got licensed in one, but I think what both my sisters drove funny car. My dad, I think they're all nuts.
Here's what's interesting. The Force family is so synonymous within the NHRA, okay? John Force, as I mentioned, your father, and I know probably every interview you do, people mention John Force, right? Which is the highest of compliments, but one thing that I've come to know and learn and appreciate is that, and I love this, when it comes to the NHRA, the National Hot Rod Association, and a sport that started out with, at one time it was guys running through the desert and just figuring out places where they could see whose hot rod was faster than the other. And yet Indianapolis is your biggest event. This is the creme de la creme. The U.S. Nationals right here in central Indiana is the deal. Why? And I know this answer, but I'm going to ask you for our listeners. Why is Indianapolis your ultimate stage?
It's always been one of the biggest races on our circuit. It's the final race before the points reset, and we go into that countdown. So now it's the fight for the championship after this event. It's 1.5 points. So you want to do as well as you can to inch up there as close as you can in that number one spot. This weekend, it's the Cornwall Quality Tools Nationals, U.S. Nationals. I'm running Cornwall colors with my teammate Austin Prock in the Cornwall Funny Car. And it's a race within a race. There's The Too Fast, Too Tasty Mission Foods Challenge going on. And then the funny cars have, the All-Star Call-Out Race. So there's a lot going on. And we race on Monday. So it's an exciting event. There's a lot going on.
But tonight's now tell me your schedule for the weekend, because I've always felt like the sneaky night to go and time to go for the U.S. Nationals out at Lucas Oil Raceway Park, IRP, whichever way people want to call it now. I always thought Friday night is the real deal because of the visuals of it.
Absolutely. Tonight would be the night. We run late. We run 7:30. We do one qualifying session tonight, 7:30 p.m. And that's when it's starting to get dark. You really see those flames coming out of the headers. And then we have a busy weekend. Race day's not until Monday. So the rest of the weekend's qualifying, but this is the one night session tonight.
Here is a dumb question. I walked outside earlier today. And, a lot of times, Brittany Force is our guest here in studio. A lot of times this time of year in Indianapolis, it's hot, sticky, and humid. You kind of never know. Indy's a different place than that. You're from California, where the weather is probably, from a humidity level, pretty similar year-round. When you go out there in these cars and the conditions can change, and let's say on Sunday, suddenly we get back to typical late August, early September, Indiana, the air's thick, it's more humid. How does that affect these cars?
That is definitely where our crew chiefs come on board. And I have one of the greatest crew chiefs in the business, David Grubnick and John Collins. And that is one of the challenging things. Out here today, the weather is perfect. Like you said, there's no humidity. It's perfect and cool. And this morning when I walked out, I said, wow, I wish it would stay this weekend. Or stay like this all weekend long. You'd be able to run killer all weekend long, especially tonight. But I just know every weekend we come out here, it starts this way, and then it gets hot and muggy, and that's when it gets more challenging to run in those
and I would
conditions.
assume your engines are kind of like we are as people, in the fact that they like it a little bit cooler, and that this is going to, again, sound dumb, but when you're sitting in that car and the air is thicker, can you feel it? Can you feel that there is a little more resistance that you've got to cut through, as opposed to a thin air with no humidity? I realize this is the dumbest thing that I've ever said.
No. No, I can't feel that. I mean, when I've run, when we run, you're running so fast, the mile per hour is so high, you can't tell a difference. Even if we have a crosswind, you can't feel it half the time. But yeah, you feel it in your race car when it's hot and sticky, and you're sweating in your fire suit. I wear about 20 to 25 pounds of gear about. So yeah, it gets hot. I feel it as a driver when I get in that cockpit. When
you are sitting there and you're watching, the tree, as we call it, the lights that are counting down for when it's time to start your run, which is more important, I guess, to you? The laser focus of keeping your eye right there and making sure you don't blink and miss that millisecond of when it's time to go, or the reaction time of telling your foot when it's time to go, or simply the wrist power of keeping the thing straight?
It's a combination of all of it. Luckily, the wrist power in a dragster, we don't do much steering unless you get in trouble.
Saying you got to make sure it's not getting away from you, is what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah, of course. I always have a light grip on that steering wheel, but it's a combination of both. Exactly what you just said. You're laser beam focus, staring at that amber for it to light up, and it's one motion. It's not you see it and you step. It's got to be one motion. You're ready to go. You're ready to react.
And it's fascinating because I've done I guess we'd call it the two-seater, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching and I'm thinking, okay, well, this is going to be over. This is over before I know it. And it felt like, and I think I mentioned this to you a year ago, when that light went off and we went down, it felt like I was falling from, like, skydiving. The G-force that hit me in the abdomen. And then I'm curious, do you get used to that, or do you feel that every single time?
You do feel it every single time, but I guess you get used to it. The first few times out, like full passes in a top fuel car, I actually would work my way down a racetrack to get licensed. It was, drive to 330, drive to the half track cone. And I couldn't tell you if I was on the starting line or the finish line. I'm like, you want me to spot a cone when you're going that fast? It is a blur. And I remember Robert Height sat me down and said, I promise it'll slow down. It's just your mind's got to catch up. You've got to get used to it. You got to get seat time. And sure enough, I could go out on a run and I could come back and tell my crew chief I clicked it 200 feet before the starting line, and he'll pull it up on the computer, and sure enough, it's 200 feet before the 1,000 foot that I shut it off. So you do get used to it. You really do. But still, for me, it's not the launch. It's when you throw your parachutes on the other end, it's like getting the wind knocked out. You get kicked in the chest. You almost feel like you lose your breath. when you throw those chutes because it's then negative G's.
I asked you this a year ago before we let you go. And again, if I'm not mistaken, 18 career wins, I believe, right? So we certainly wish you the best in adding to that total this weekend. Again, the Cornwell Quality Tools NHRA U.S. Nationals are here in Indianapolis this weekend. Tonight would be an awesome night to go. All of the tickets available at NHRA.com or, of course, Lucas Oil Raceway as well. I asked you this a year ago, but I know he has a ton of fans. And, you know, your father was seriously injured in an accident and has worked his way back from that. How is John Force doing?
He's doing great. We did a media day yesterday, so he loves being out here, loves being with his race cars. Jack Beckman has stepped in the seat for him, and they're unveiling a specialty car this evening tonight that Jack will be running in. So a lot around, a lot going on this weekend, but glad to have him out here. This is where he needs to be. It's after his wreck last season, it was really difficult, and it took him. He put in the hours, he put in the work and physical therapy, to get back to being at the racetrack with all his teams. And it's crazy because I think everything happens for a reason. And his first win back last season was Las Vegas, and it was my first win in 2 years. I doubled up with Austin Prock, and he was standing there on the starting line for that. So,
that had to be
very
awesome,
special
right?
event.
It means so much to him, but yet he means so much to, I think, not just NHRA, but racing in general, American sport in general, right? And it has been fascinating to watch just in terms of, for you and your sisters and just the family and the business in general, I guess almost the responsibility of making him proud. And I know that sounds the wrong way because I don't mean that as a personal internal pressure, but he has that. He's the kind of guy, John Force, that I know I've told you this before. Like, I met him one time to do an interview with him, a gabillion years ago, and literally the rest of the day I thought, I need to do my job the right way here because this guy expects me to, right? He just has this infectious energy of perfection about him and expectation, but not in a demeaning way. It really is something fascinating. But I just think that racing in general, in all forms of racing, is a better sport when John Force is enjoying it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, he is quite a personality. I'll tell you that. And I'm lucky that when I came into the sport, I had him to guide me and teach me everything and teach me not just about the driving part of the job, but the media and the sponsors and meeting with the fans, spending time with the fans. He's taught me so much in the sport and NHRA drag racing, but you can't know NHRA drag racing without knowing John Force.
How often do you get to go, by the way, and see Indy cars? I mean, I realize the schedules, but you mentioned Graham Rahal. The schedules oftentimes, I work the broadcast for IndyCar, so we're usually at an event at the same time that you guys are there. Do you ever get a chance to come around it?
Not this year. I have not made it out this season, I don't believe. I usually try to go to, their Indy race, Long Beach, but I think it crossed over with one of ours, so this year was just more difficult. We watched at home on TV, but haven't made it out this season.
Long Beach is the best. Southern California is the best. Listen, you guys are smart for living in Southern California, right? I mean, nothing wrong with that. We wish you the best of luck this weekend. Give me again your schedule for today. I mean, you go back out and you start getting underway when?
We kick off tonight. 7:30 is Funny Car will be out first, and Top Fuel will run right behind them.
And so, do you have any sort of routine that you have to do before then, or is it just a matter of making sure that you're in and you're safe, and then you're good to go?
Routine. It's yes, I'm actually very routine, but it's just our normal routine that I carry over every weekend. Get out there with my team, talk with my crew chief. What is our game plan? What is our goal for one run at a time? So we focus on tonight's run, what we're aiming for, what kind of ET we're going to put on the board, how many cars are out there, and it's getting warmed up, suited up, and then we head up to make our first run.
There is no access like going out to the NHRA. You get a ticket for that. You can walk through. You can see them. I mean, the detail that you see of every single inch and everything that's getting cleaned up and ready for the runs, and you can see all of it. It is as fan-friendly as anything you're going to get for the U.S. Nationals. Cornwell Quality Tools, U.S. Nationals. The Monster Energy machine, of course, will be piloted by Brittany Force. Appreciate it, as always. Best of luck, all right?
Thank you very much.
All right, when we come back, we've got a little football to talk, including one guy with family ties. Speaking of that, that's a theme today. We should have Alex B. Keaton here. Family ties to Indianapolis when it comes to the marquee event in college football of the weekend. We'll talk to a guy that knows a little about what I'm talking about, and we'll do it on the other side. You're listening to Query & Company here, Friday edition. You're listening to it on The Fan. Family ties theme here on the program today, mostly because I just like talking about shows that had their peak 40 years ago. Probably not unlike this one. But as we get set for the weekend, we just talked to Brittany Force, and of course, her family connection to not only John Force, but her brother-in-law, Graham Rahal. U.S. Nationals this weekend, and in college football, everything getting underway this weekend. Last night, a big win for UIndy over Marion. Wyoming got a 10-0 win over over Akron at Akron, which I think counts as a half a win.
Still a win, Jake.
They blanked Akron, who, if I'm not mistaken, when Indiana beat Akron in 7 overtimes, Tom Allen kicked over 2 trash cans and carried off a trophy. And people were like, what are we doing here? They're like 285th in the college football.
A 1, a 2. You know what to do.
That's right. That's exactly what he did. But the big one in college football this weekend is going to be Ohio State and Texas. And Arch Manning with some family ties when it comes to Indianapolis, because not only Peyton Manning, but now everybody and their brother is convinced that the Colts are going to make the march for Arch, as if they're the first team to think of that little riddle. Joining us now to talk about that and the Cowboys in the news, he is with the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. He is a return guest to the program. He is Mac Engel. Hello, Mac.
Jake, it's good to hear your voice, sir. How are things in my hometown, Indianapolis, Indiana?
You know, here's the excitement that I've had in the last couple of weeks. You were home, what was it, 2 or 3 weeks ago you were home? Am I not supposed to say this?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so you and I get a bite to eat, and then, I don't know, probably a week after that, I thought, you know what, that's kind of a cool place we went. So I happened to be in the area, and I went back in there a couple of days. Shannon and I went in there, and the gal that waited on us says, "Oh, I remember you." And I said, "Oh, well, that's very flattering. Thank you. You know, I do a dog and pony show here in town." She said, "No, I mostly remember you because you're a friend." Oh, okay. Well, he doesn't live here. So there you go.
Are you serious?
Yeah, yeah.
That's very nice of you. Jake, when you get to be my age, you write that stuff down. It doesn't happen very much.
She said, and I quote, "Oh, I don't remember much about you, but I remember your friend." Okay, thanks.
Well, the problem is, like, she didn't say what she remembered. She just remembered. So it could have been anything,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
I'm going to take it as, this guy's incredibly good looking and handsome. That's what she remembered.
She remembered that we were the only 2 people in the place, and they could hear everything we were talking about. I think that was it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's begin with this. Well, and I want to talk about the deal with the Cowboys, too, only because I think it does have some NFL-wide and maybe even Colt implications, and I'll get to that. But I want to start with Arch Manning. There is so much praise and expectation. You have covered UT. You have been around in the times when he has worked his way into rotation, but now the keys to the kingdom are his. Will he live up to all of the expectation?
What are your expectations?
I think there are people that believe that he is going to be in the same lineage as Peyton or Eli, and perhaps even take it a step further.
I'm going to bet on him. I mean, he still hasn't played major college football much, other than a couple of starts last season, and they put him in here and there. I'm just not going to bet against a Manning. I'm not. So, yes, I think he will live up to it. I think he will win a national championship if he stays 2 years. I don't know if he's going to stay both years or not. But I'm not going to bet against a Manning, and especially when I got to see him play last season in his limited starts in place of Quinn Ewers, I was like, that guy's got it. And I think he's going to be terrific. He reminds me more, and I realize when I'm going to say this one, I saw this guy in video highlights than I did as opposed to watching Peyton and Eli play live. But physically watching him play, he reminds me more of his granddad than Peyton or Eli, and I think he's going to be terrific.
So you think he has more mobility? Because, you know, it's funny, Archie Manning had mobility, but part of that was because Archie Manning, when he was in New Orleans, had to, right? You know what I mean? He had to run around for his life. Eli and Peyton had probably better protection, but nobody would disguise Peyton as, you know, a super athlete around the corners. But that said, will they design even runs for Arch Manning, or is that just an aspect that they use when all hell's breaking loose?
No, they've designed plays for him to run. And I don't know if you remember watching the national semifinal game, the Cotton Bowl between Texas and Ohio State. They brought him in for certain packages, and then the play he got knocked out was a designed run, and he suffered a concussion on it. I don't think it was a bad one, but it was enough of one that later in the game when they had it inside the 10, UT had it inside the 10, they didn't bring him in, which was a sign that something was off. And I don't, because it was the last game of the season, I don't think they ever came out and officially said he had a concussion. But if you watch the hit that he sustained, it was a design run. He executed it fine. It was just one of those random football plays that happened. And so they will design. They already have. I mean, he can run. And everything I'd ever heard about the Manning family, and I realize a lot of it's more myth than reality, was that his dad was actually the best athlete of the three sons.
Right,
and,
Cooper, yeah.
And not that, and you and I both know, if you played Division I sports in anything, you were a top-end athlete. So it's not like Eli was some bum athlete, or certainly Peyton, but they weren't as fleet of foot as maybe Cooper was. We never really got to see Cooper because he got hurt. But I think this guy can do more with his legs than either one of his uncles could. And like you said, was Archie really that gifted of a runner, or was he doing it just to save his own life? And we'll never know.
Mac, do you believe, and I want to preface this, it's not like you would know this. I mean, I'm assuming that you're not sitting in on the family dinners of the Mannings, but just in being around and maybe seeing a little of Arch Manning and knowing the history, there is so much talk in Indianapolis as to, and I think it's more hopeful hyperbole, but there is talk of, gosh, the Colts should just tank everything and wait and get Arch Manning. And that there would be this immediate link, and Arch Manning would pack up the Mayflower truck and move here, right? Do you think that there is the chance, I do believe this, that because of the way things ended with Peyton, that the Mannings would pull an Eli with the Chargers and say, no, he's not going to sign there?
I think it just depends on how they think the organization's being run. Obviously the guy who's running the organization then is gone, God rest his soul. And I have no clue. You would be far more plugged into that than I would be. And if they, when they didn't want, I understood why they didn't want to go to the Chargers. Why they were really hesitant about Eli going to San Diego. Everything I had ever heard, and I talked to friends of mine who played for them, that wasn't a great organization. It wasn't quite the Bengals or anything like that, but they wanted them away from that for a reason. I don't know how the Colts are going to be run. I don't know if it's going to be in that same strata as some of these other sort of dysfunctional franchises. But the part to me that's really impressed me about his dad is that they have gone out of their way, and they know what they're doing. They've really stressed for Eli to be as much of a student, and for this to just take its natural time than to force anything the way Quinn Ewers did, or so many other of these guys now who are lining this up since their sophomore year in high school. And they've really stressed to him to take normal class loads, to graduate, to do all this stuff, to try to keep this normal, because it's not normal. There's nothing normal about it, but they want to. So I don't think they're sitting there worrying about any of it. If he has a great year and they think the time is right, then they'll come out. And if not, he'll stick around for one more year and make a lot of money and hopefully be a great quarterback at UT and have a lot of fun.
He was redshirted, so in the classroom he is organically a junior or senior right now.
I think he's a senior. The way these are going now, and I've learned this the hard way talking to college players, these guys are staying on campus so much in the summertime now that they're graduating in 3 years. And so I'm pretty sure he's on pace to graduate in May. I don't have the intricacies.
But this is his fourth year as a college student, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
He came on campus early. He left high school and started at UT as a freshman in January of whatever year that was. But this has all been, to his dad's credit and the family's credit, they've really tried to take this slowly. And this was all planned out. He was never going to start ahead of Quinn Ewers. There was none of that stuff. We all thought people like,
and they knew it, right? They knew it.
Pardon?
They knew it. The Mannings knew it.
Totally. And they were okay with it. And they really thought that was the best, healthiest thing to do for everybody involved. It worked out. UT was really good in Quinn's last two seasons. They didn't win a national championship. They're still really good. They did not want him starting. I knew that first season of UT being in the SEC, they wanted to like a feet wet element to it. They did, and now they should be really, really good. I don't know if they're really the best team in the nation. But I'm just, the more, even just you talking about it with you right now, Jake, would you bet against a Manning?
I know.
I can't do
I know.
it.
I mean, it is like football royalty for sure. I would bet against a Manning if they had to end up a Cowboy. How about that?
So would I.
Yeah. So we'll end with this. Micah Parsons now. The only reason I mention it is because the NFL is the 800-pound gorilla. The Cowboys are kind of a national team. Our listener Jeremiah bleeds cowboy blue. So Micah Parsons is now a Green Bay Packer, and they could not come to an agreement. What went down here, and did the Cowboys misplay this, or did they finally just wash their hands of something that's going to help them?
Probably all the above. When you had me on a couple weeks ago and I talked about this, and I'd been on other shows, I'd written it. I never, ever, ever saw this coming. Jake, if you would have told me on January 25th the Dallas Mavericks would trade Luka Doncic and the Dallas Cowboys would trade Micah Parsons within 7 months of each other or 8 months of each other, I would have been like, where's the crack you're smoking? And I just can't believe it, because at least the Cowboys, there was no precedence for this at all with Jerry Jones. This is not the Herschel Walker trade. It's not. This was Jerry. They had an agreement back, a verbal agreement between the player and the owner back in January, March, whenever it was. And then the player says, we'll negotiate these with my agent. Well, the owner got a little irritated about that. And what really set him off was this happened in the last 7 days. Micah Parsons was getting MRIs done on his back. His back is fine, and he'll play week 1 in Green Bay. Probably limited snap count, but he's going to play. He was trying to find a doctor that would say, yeah, I'm a little concerned about your back. You shouldn't play week 1, which would allow him to collect his game check. He has not missed any checks during this holdout at all because he's been there at camp. Well, that finally was the part where it caused the Cowboys' brain trust to go to the head coach, to go to the quarterback and said, hey, what would you think if we trade this guy? And both parties said, do what you got to do. So they got what they could for him, and it's a joke of a deal. I mean, could you think of, for an Indianapolis comparison, would the Colts ever have traded Dwight Freeney at 26 years old for 2 first-round picks to a team that's probably going to be drafting in the last third of the first round and a 30-year-old defensive player?
Well, I think the thing that makes it peculiar, Mac, is it would be the Indianapolis Colts trading 26-year-old Dwight Freeney to the Kansas City Chiefs at that time, or maybe not the New England Patriots, but I mean certainly a team that the Chiefs were a team that was a contending AFC playoff team at that time, and that's what Green Bay is, right? Green Bay's better than Dallas.
Green Bay's better than Dallas. It's the youngest team in the league. Parsons is 26 years old, and they were just sick of him. And there was one part to it that I was a little sympathetic. Had the Cowboys paid him, they were going to have 3 players at their respective positions making either the most or second most of their spot. Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons. Well, you can justify 2 of the 3 of them. The quarterback thing is just where you fall in line. And to me, that's a lot. That's a lot of cap space to eat up for 3 guys. But it's done. He's gone. And I think the Cowboys are going to be rebuilding. They got a decent player who's 30 years old in return. But to me, in my mind, this closes the door on Dak Prescott's chances of getting to an NFC Championship game. This team was at best a wild card team, and now you take away not their best defensive player, but their best player off the field. And I just don't see how this is going to really do anything other than keep them right around mediocre at best.
Mac, you grew up in this town. You're now a columnist in a big market that covers a big NFL team in the Dallas Cowboys. Before we let you go, I want to know this as somebody who grew up in Indy. Yesterday, the Washington Post had the article regarding the last few years of Jim Irsay and the grip that addiction had on him. That is a relevant news story in your opinion, or one that you let bygones be bygones and let the man rest in peace?
It's funny you should say that. I thought about that a lot. I think it depended on what point in my life, just being candid with you. I think at my age, I'm 52 now, I think I would have said, let the man rest in peace. We were well aware of his addictions. There was no secret. I think he wore some of that on his sleeve. I think anybody who spent, when I saw him a few times when he would come down to NFL owners meetings in Dallas and I would see him, it was awful. My heart went out to him. Whatever I think about him as an owner, blah, 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 he looked like hell. So on this one, I thought, wow, why are we doing this? And he's gone.
I go back and forth. And then there's part of me that does think about the fact, I'm simply saying it as devil's advocate here, but if you have an NFL team that via the stadium that they play in is largely publicly subsidized, and that public subsidy has helped greatly inflate the net value and net worth of the owner, do the people and the fans of that city and that capital improvement board, are they entitled to know the transparency that decisions being made are being made with clarity of thought?
That's a hell of an argument, and I can't. And you know what? If you consider the news organization that reported the story, no owner was more influential in the ouster of Dan Snyder than Jim Irsay. I was going to say Jim Irsay. So I can understand. You can convince me that it was relevant for all the reasons that you just said. I'm a big believer in, I'm like, if you're getting public money, then I'm sorry, the standards are different. And Jim Irsay, I can't think of a man in the private sector who benefited more from the generosity of Hoosier taxpayers more than Jim Irsay. I maybe the Simons are in that conversation. My heart, obviously my heartstrings are affected somewhat by the Simons' generosity for what they showed back for the Pacers in Indiana back in the mid '80s. But in terms of Jim, Jake, it wouldn't take much to convince me that your point is valid, and that's fair game.
I have a feeling, Mac, in conclusion, I don't know this. I have nothing to base this on. But I'll bet you the doctor who was mentioned in that article that was prescribing or giving him allegedly, I'll use allegedly, ketamine if I'm saying that correctly, but administering him opiates, it would not surprise me if we don't continue to hear that name or an epilogue to that story involving that.
Are we thinking like this is like a Michael Jackson doctor?
Listen, I'm going all this is allegedly, and I'm just saying if you looked at that article, there's simply a precedent for that reaction to that involvement.
Well,
if in fact that, but that's a whole different. I mean, that's a legal can of worms that I'm not. You know what I mean? I mean, I've seen a couple of legal commercials during Family Ties episodes, and that's the extent of my law degree.
But Jake, that's a valid concern and complaint at the medical community. I don't have any money compared to Jim Irsay or a lot of people, and it would not be hard for me at all to call a doctor who's a friend of mine and say, hey, would you do me a favor? And I'm nobody.
Right.
And we both know that people in that position of power, leverage, and authority and influence.
But are there people who made money off of Jim Irsay that now are not making money off Jim Irsay who feel that somebody else is responsible for the fact that they're now being denied money?
Yeah. I mean, it's a sad reality of it. I know a lot of people in the NFL circles called Jim Irsay out for the double standards that he enjoyed, and I think they're all valid. But it's the golden rule. He who has the gold rules.
That's right.
And Jim Irsay, thanks to Bob, had a lot of gold.
I will let Mac, the waitress, know next time you're in town. She seemed very excited, and I mean that not in a creepy way at all. She just, she was like, "You guys were so cool." I'm like, "Well, Mac is, not me." So there you go.
Well, thank you very much, Jake. Hey, you know what? Thanks for letting me come on because I totally whiffed. The last time you had me on here talking about Michael Parsons, I couldn't have been any more wrong because I'm sure I came on and said, "Oh, they'll get a deal done 5 minutes before kickoff and he'll play and it'll be fine."
We're used to that. And when you wrote up a column on Mac's movies, you also said The Predator was a great movie. So you're 0 for 2 now. Okay,
I'm not wrong about that one. It's time classic.
All right, see you, Mac.
All right, it was good talking to you, Jake. See you later.
Mac Engel began his writing career writing columns called Mac's Movies for the Eastwood newspaper in 1985. It was that or talk about the Colts, and at that time they had, like I said, we didn't know who the quarterback was going to be. My, how times have changed, huh? Busy show, Eddie. Who else do we have lined up for today?
I got Kevin Bowen at the top of the hour. Kyle Netterip at 1:30 to preview week 2 of
high school football, right?
Yes. 2:15, Taylor Tannebaum of ESPN, the ACC Network, will join us at 2:30. A pretty cool story that happened earlier this week in Fort Wayne that we'll talk about, and one of the athletic directors of these schools up in Fort Wayne will join us.
Nice. Little good for the heart.
Yes, sir.
There, right? All right,
yes,
we'll continue rolling along. Kevin Bowen in 10. I'm simply saying this for the sake of explanation. It's not, I don't want it to appear as though I'm saying it like, yes, absolutely. But I do think that it is a fair point. And that is when, and I understand both sides of it. I completely understand and respect both sides of this. But someone had asked me, Jake, you keep mentioning public subsidy. How does that relate to the Jim Irsay story? I don't know that it does, but I don't know that it can be ruled out either. And what I mean by that is simply this. When the Indianapolis Colts were playing in the RCA Dome, and it was Bill Polian as much as I remember Bill Polian saying competitive disadvantage. The Colts had kind of convinced the city of Indianapolis that playing in Indianapolis because of its market size was a disadvantage in the NFL. I personally, in that regard, disagree because the NFL has a salary cap and revenue sharing. So theoretically, every team in the NFL has a maximum they can spend, and every team in the NFL has an equal distribution of money they bring in. Now, certainly, your auxiliary sponsorships you can sell and whatever else, the money that you make on top of that, you can make a lot more in Los Angeles or whatever else, but that is not money that is going in towards building the competitiveness by nature of salary of your team. It's not like baseball. But I digress. In Indianapolis, at that time period, the early 2000s, the city, like a lot of cities, were worried about notably their franchise moving to Los Angeles. And I always felt when the Colts moved from Baltimore to Indianapolis, it was such an unpopular move within the league that it was then determined by the owners of the NFL that for a franchise to relocate, it needed 80% approval from its fellow franchise owners. So if there were 32 teams, 31 other teams had to vote. So basically 25 had to give you the okay. If you had 6 holdouts that said you can't move, then you weren't moving. And if you look, what to me is interesting is when Los Angeles did not have a franchise, during that time you had Minnesota that underwent renovations that got a new stadium, you had Kansas City that underwent renovations, you had Cincinnati that got a new stadium, you had Indianapolis that got a new stadium, you had New York that got a new stadium, you had Dallas that got a new stadium, you had Arizona that got a new stadium. That's top of my head. Atlanta, there's 8 right there. At any time, you were never going to get total approval because there were always going to be at least 6 owners that didn't want a franchise to move to Los Angeles because they knew that Los Angeles was their equal wild card to throw against their city taxpayers and say, if you don't build me a new stadium, I'm off to Los Angeles. Once all of those teams were taken care of and all of those new stadiums were developed, then guess what? All of a sudden then it was A-OK for the Rams to go back to Los Angeles and the Chargers to go to Los Angeles. But during that time, the Colts got a very, very owner-favorable deal, perhaps the most in the NFL, for public subsidy, meaning that 40% of all non-football revenue dollars at Lucas Oil Stadium went to the Indianapolis Colts, which was independently owned by Jim Irsay. So for that reason, and his net worth went from some, estimated in 1997, 8, 9, 2000, the mid, like probably 400, 500 million to now being worth, say, 4.5 to 5 billion. And a great part of that is because of the luxuries that came from that subsidy. Simply the point and the connection would be if you have the taxpayers of a market subsidizing the building and the overall net of the owner, then does that mean that those taxpayers are owed the transparency that the decisions, both in business and in football, are being made with clarity of thought and with somebody who is totally dialed in towards making the right decisions all the time? I'm not saying that did or didn't happen. I'm saying that is the connection that people would make in terms of making the case why there should be a better transparency of the person in charge and the decisions that they make and the health that they were in. That's it. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. That's simply the explanation. Kevin Bowen joins us next. Kevin Bowen, you hear in the mornings on this fine radio station. The Fan Morning Show with Jeff Rickard and James Boyd on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan joins us now to talk about a number of different things, as we do often on Fridays, in particular during the football season. Kevin, I'll begin with this. If you look at the 53-man roster for the Colts, and just maybe if you kind of go back and look at your notes and that kind of thing, sparing injury, which, we certainly hope never is the case, but sparing injury, when you look over this particular roster, how many players on the 53-man are still there, let's say, 1 month in after 4 games? In other words, is this the kind of roster that you look at and you say they might have kind of bookended it at spots 51, 2, and 3 with short-term necessity, and then they will go back and replace other players for the long haul once others are healthy? Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, it definitely does. I would say not as many as maybe I would have thought. Naturally, I think you're always going to have maybe 1 to 2. They're certainly looking to work out some veteran defensive players at linebacker and corner here. So, maybe you would have, again, 52 or 53 that might need to sweat it out a little bit. But, one thing to point out about waiver claims, again, you cut your roster to 53 on Tuesday. Then over the next 24 hours, you can put in claims for players all around the NFL. Obviously, we saw Juju Brents be claimed by Miami. We saw Jelani Woods be claimed by the Jets. We saw Samuel Womack be claimed by the Titans. The only waiver claim the Colts put in, all 31 teams, all their cuts, was for Chad Mumba, the linebacker who they ended up getting. But that was it. So, some years, Ballard's first year, for example, the Colts claimed 5 guys. And clearly they didn't feel the need to be that active yet. So, again, naturally, I think, you're going to have 1 to 2 maybe veterans that you find, a la Xavier Howard and that type. Maybe you'll do that over the next handful of days. But I think for the most part, this will be, a large chunk of the roster that you see a week from Friday.
The situation at quarterback is the obvious that jumps out, right? But when you look at the receiving core, and I do like their receivers, and a particular tight end at Tyler Warren, and then, Jelani Woods not making the roster, do you think that in any way, shape, or form, the receiving room or the offensive skill set players, that the final decisions of guys may have been made based on who was under quarterback? Or is that completely irrelevant between Jones, Richardson, Leonard, whoever it may be, towards what players make those final spots?
Yeah, I think it's pretty irrelevant to make the team. Now, maybe on game day, you get a little bit more selective and, game plan specific stuff. And, Alec Pierce is probably the one that comes to mind the most, that I am curious about how much he is impacted negatively from Jones and not Richardson. We've seen him, catch deep balls from Jones in practice, but that's never really been his MO, Daniel Jones, that is, in game settings. So, clearly that's been something that Richardson has done a whole lot of. Flacco with his big arm did a lot with that too when he was playing last year. So Pierce would be the one once you transition to game day. But outside of that, I think I think it was pretty straightforward with how they handle cuts.
How did you think Shane Steichen handled this camp and off season versus years past? Same, different, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely different, and I guess I'm speaking specifically to training camp. The NFL mandates like a ramp-up period. I think it's like the 3 or 4 first practices where you don't put on full pads yet. And then once they got to that end of that period, they might have worn full pads in every practice the rest of camp. And I think if you'll notice it, camp was a little bit more spread out. Not a ton of practices, to be clear, but, maybe they'd only go 2 straight days and then they take a day off, or, 1 day and a day off. But when they did go, they were always in full pads, seemingly. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm missing a day, which I think that is a little bit of a change. Preseason playing time, I'm sure the quarterback competition dictated this, but, he played, obviously, Jones, I guess, maybe 3 quarters if you add it all up. I mean, that's not a ton, frankly, but I tend to think that might even be a little bit more than he's played the starter recently. The defensive guys went out there for a quarter. Yeah, now that I speak on it out loud, I don't know if he did a whole lot differently preseason playing time, but again, I thought training camp was definitely different in just the amount of full padded days.
Kevin Bowen is our guest. You hear him on the the morning show, obviously, the fan morning show with Jeff Rickard and James Boyd. When you look over the Colts and in this particular roster, one of the things that's interesting to me, I've made this point to you before. When you play Little League Baseball, okay, if you try out for Little League Baseball, did you play Little League Baseball, Kevin?
Yes, sir.
You played where?
Carmel Dad's Club.
Okay. And I know you're obviously an elite level state champion golfer. On a 1 to 10 scale, what was your baseball skill set?
Oh, 6, and that might be generous. I
Okay.
loved baseball though so much.
So in baseball at the Little League level, oftentimes you put kind of your weakest player like in left field. My apologies to people whose kids are playing left field, but but that's the
right field
kid.
and second base. There goes little Johnny out there.
So the kid that's still learning the position usually gets kind of put out in left field. It feels to me like linebacker in this defense for the Colts has become their left field. Now, that's no disrespect to Zaire Franklin and the players they have, but it just seemed like in this defense in today's NFL, and I know it's a cyclical league, but is the linebacker spot becoming the one, not that you put your weakest player, I don't mean it that way, but the one where you can just kind of mask guys versus other positions within this defense?
Shout out to Eddie Hamilton. I'll never forget him beaning me in the butt in 6th grade, and I cried so hard.
Really?
Honestly, the seams might still be on the right cheek of mine as I turn to take that one right off the butt. Yeah, that's probably my grandest Little League memory. I think it's a good analogy, and I also think that you probably could say that league wide. Honestly, just the day and age of, hey, here's our 4-3, and we've got these 3 thumping linebackers, and they're gonna stop the run. That's just largely gone, I would say, across the league. Now, some teams are a little bit more willing to maybe play 3 linebackers than the Colts. I think under Lou Anarumo, it's not going to be a heavily invested position group, and the Colts probably have the least. I would argue they probably have the least inexperienced linebacker group, the most inexperienced, I should say, linebacker group in the entire league. And then Zaire Franklin, the one, he's yet to take an 11-on-11 rep in a game with Anarumo's defense. He missed so much of all the spring and then, or all the team periods, I should say, in the spring, and then a lot of camp as well. So, yeah, that is a definite unknown. It's probably the biggest question mark on the roster. But the good news is, to your point, it's an area that's like, you can probably get away with it to a degree. Now, run-heavy teams, Denver kind of comes to mind there in week 2. When you face those types of teams, how much do they try to expose that?
Kevin, the linebacker, the reason I mentioned it about the linebacker spot, I'm curious. I mean, when you look at the league in general, it just feels this way, like in the last couple of years that I've noticed this. But is this more about just this particular defense for the Colts this year, or is this kind of a league-wide trend in the fact that you'd rather have, your guys on the end and your edge and those things, and then an additional, because of the way passing rules are, an additional defensive back? Is this a Colts thing or a league thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Colts are a little bit more on the full in on it, but I would say for the most part, the rest of the NFL is like that. I mean, just look at recent drafts. I can't recall many linebackers going in round 1 of drafts, even kind of big money investments as well. And I think naturally you have to have some positions like that. I mean, you've probably heard this from me a lot. To me, there's kind of 5 premium positions in the NFL: quarterback, wideout, blindside tackle, defensive end, and corner. You can rank those however you want. And honestly, that's probably been the biggest nemesis of the Ballard era. Obviously, quarterback would be the poster child of it, but not finding enough substance at those 5 spots. He found plenty of linebackers. There's no debating that. He's a Hall of Fame drafter at linebacker, no matter the day, no matter the round. Yet, the other ones have probably been more the bugaboo.
Kevin, what else, I guess, before we move on to another subject matter here, and I know you talked about it plenty in the morning, but for our audience, what, if anything, did jump out at you about the roster itself? Maybe an area where you were surprised how deep they were, or an area where you were surprised how shallow they were, or even, gosh, it looks like they're really emphasizing this particular style, and I didn't anticipate it.
Definitely cornerback. Again, in the 9 years of Ballard, I don't think a position group has received that much investment in a single off season. And really, it's, a couple of the guys didn't even play football last year, which, is kind of wild. But when you think about it, they went out, they paid Javarius Ward, I think the most lucrative free agent contract of any Colt ever. They drafted Justin Wally in round 3. Now, unfortunately, he tore his ACL. They then go out and they sign Xavier Howard, former All-Pro. Now, didn't play football last year, and he's 32 years old. Now, so there's a little bit of a question mark. Can you find Stephon Gilmore 2.0? They trade a 6th-round pick for Mekhi Blackman, a former 3rd-rounder, who also didn't play football last year with a torn ACL. So, when you add up all of that, they cut Juju Brents. They still brought back their big snap guys from last year, Kenny Moore, Jalen Jones. So it's just it's quite a 180. And you know what? A major credit to Chris Ballard for attempting to solve a 2024 issue. Cornerback depth was greatly tested early in the season and largely failed. And he looked at it, and I'm sure Lou Anarumo's influence helped out, but he looked at it and decided to do something about it. And we'll see, obviously, if it works out. But at the very least, I think there's been too many times where you've been wanting him to get the bat off his shoulders, to go back to our Little League analogy, I guess. And he hasn't even done that. It's been, the old backwards K. And it's like, well, I'd like to at least see the frontwards K, like at least go down swinging. And this is definitely an attempt at going down swinging.
Kevin, I'll tell you one area where I think you and I would have been doing point counterpoint if I was still doing the morning show with you, because I think we disagree on this. So I wanted you to explain, why you're wrong. I thought that Chris Ballard in his press conference, now admittedly, I wasn't in the room. I mean, we were on the air and I was watching it and listening to it. And I know that Chris Ballard, and I said when I was talking about it, I completely understand and respect that it would get old having everybody tell you, like, how to do your job. I mean, we get enough of that as it is. I totally get it. I respect where he's coming from. But even with that, the baseline of that being the norm just in that position or in general, I thought he was more defensive and quicker to jump in and try to redirect questions than he has been in the past. And I thought it came off almost like he was overcompensatory in trying to explain that he did not feel pressure in his job. But I think you disagree with that. Tell me why.
Well, let me start here. I guess I could be numb to it, to be honest with you. Just sitting in, this is probably the 6th time he's spoken to the media since the end of last season. So, in some way, shape, or form, I've heard him have to like that pressure question, for example, late where he answers about the real job. He at the start of training camp was asked a very similar question. He deflected that and saying, no, pressure is paycheck to paycheck. Pressure is, and that's where you want to kind of grab the mic and be like, dude, we get it. We're in an NFL bubble here. We're not in every human being on the planet is, whatever, eating from the same plate. So I largely think if you watch Chris Ballard press conferences in the last 2 to 3 years especially, you will see defensive. You will see feistiness. You'll see all of that. I mean, you obviously watched and listened to it, which is different than reading the quotes. He interjects at one point, like, did you listen to me? I think he said that to Stephen Holder. I didn't. I mean, I think he says something along those lines every single time he's in front of a mic. And I thought Joel A. Erickson pointed this out well right before the press conference was going to start. He goes, this is going to be very feisty, Ballard, because, and really annually, I'd say this press conference is always that. When you think about it, he talks really 5 or 6 times every year. End of the season, combine, owners' meetings, draft. I'm trying to think when else. Probably the start of training camp, and then this one, 10 days before the start of the season. Well, now it's bleep or get off the pot. Now it's, oh boy, it's easy to build it all, and talk about it during optimism season, the draft, free agency, training camp. But now we are here, and so maybe there's a little bit of that in his tone.
Yeah, so I guess that was my point. I just thought he typically has that, and I kind of understand it. It would get old, the same questions over and over. But then at the same time, I guess the part of me, Kevin, and you tell me if I'm wrong, is if you're tired of answering the same question over and over, then like do something about making sure that it doesn't get asked again, right?
Sure. And I think, honestly, just so many of the words just end with hollowness, if that's even a word, I guess,
Of course.
in that, you look at the resume, and I go back to when we had him on at the Combine, and there were two questions that I asked him that I felt were kind of met with some very specific kind of like, damn, like that's the answer for that question. But then I'm like, well, I guess he's not wrong. And the two questions were, why are you getting the ninth year? And he basically said in that answer that Jim Irsay and him, at the end of the 2022 season, they agreed to this patient master plan of we're going to hire a first-year head coach. We're going to draft a young quarterback. They obviously drafted the youngest and the rawest quarterback you can imagine. And that means the leash is going to grow. And that was the answer on why he's getting a ninth year, not because he's built a playoff team here or there, or he's won the AFC South here or there, or he had this great stretch 4 years ago and they think they're going to resurrect that. Like, none of that was in the answer. The other question was, what is your greatest accomplishment through 8 years? And he points to, something that happened in 2018, getting to the postseason, beating Houston, points to 2020, getting into the playoffs. Well, in the NFL world, 5 and 7 years ago,
It's like dog years.
Light years.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I don't know, maybe back in February, that's when I really kind of walked away from him. I was like, damn, those answers, I guess he's not wrong, but they're just met with just, again, such hollowness. And that's the same thing I felt like going into that press room the other day, where it was just like, I wasn't expecting much. And I thought simply his best answer was one of his most succinct answers was, he got asked several times about, hey, why should fans believe in you? And he simply said, they'll believe when you win. And if you don't, they won't. And honestly, that's probably a great way, a sad way, but a great way to summarize where he's at right now.
A fascinating thing that Eddie and I came up with, Kevin, I looked at the schedule this year, and I believe, Eddie, you jump in here if I'm wrong. I believe this is correct. Do you know, Kevin Bowen, what Arizona, Kansas City, I think that's the only two. They are the only two opponents this year against the Indianapolis Colts that have what in common in regards to the night that Andrew Luck retired?
Their quarterback was found before that night.
Correct. So the point
I
being,
first was going to say there's a bird on their helmet. I thought you were going to do one of your helmet games here.
No, but you are correct. Those are the only two franchises that are quarterbacked right now by a guy that was on the roster when Andrew Luck retired. So to me, that points out the whole, well, you got to keep in mind, give me a pass. And I'm not saying that he's asked for that, but he kind of infers it from time to time. And I'm like, yeah, man, that was like football eons ago.
Right.
You know what I mean? Everybody else has had to take care of that since then, That might have been a 2021 talking point. I think he's finally realized that that's just no longer, a fair statement. And again, hindsight is 2020, but Jake, you and I probably have this conversation, but it really comes down to that first draft after Luck. When they sat there with the 13th overall pick and Jalen Hurts goes 50 something overall and Jordan Love goes 25 overall, that was your time. That was your time to sit there and say, all right, to win in this league, you have to find the quarterback that gives you that 5 to 7 year window. And they elected to go, and try to Band-Aid it up and pass on that. They obviously traded it for Buckner, that pick, which, he's turned out to be a fine player. But if that pick turns out to be Jordan Love or Jalen Hurts, I don't think we're talking about 0 playoff wins since that draft pick. What year was it that Luck retired? What was the actual date?
August 2019.
Okay, so even hindsight was 2020, and also 2020 was after Andrew Luck retired. Okay, here's the last thing. Somebody asked me this, okay? Eddie, you got a question real quick, and then I got a listener question for Kevin.
Kevin, we talked about this on Colts Corner earlier this week. If you remove just like the outside stuff with Shane Steichen, the press conferences, all that stuff, has he been a good coach when it comes to X's and O's on the field through 2 years?
I think offensive mind-wise, yeah, but there's a whole lot more that goes into being a head coach. And I think evaluating the total operation, making sure your message is heard inside that locker room and followed inside that locker room, I think he has lacked in those areas. And I think he admitted as much after last season, the whole, the standard and et cetera, et cetera. So I think, again, are you maximizing your offense as much as you can outside the quarterback, clearly? Yes, but the whole leader of the operation, I didn't think that has been lacking. I mean, he's a 500 head coach through 2 years, given the quarterback play. I don't think that's egregious by any means, but I think he could grow in some of the other non-offensive related areas.
And then as a follow-up, if you're to say that the Colts were to make the playoffs, would he be a reason why you would be confident in making that statement?
Yes, easily. I think for the Colts to make the playoffs, all the others on offense have to be very good. And by others, I mean non-Daniel Jones. So Jonathan Taylor's got to be in his prime. He's got to stay healthy. Your O-line has got to have no drop-off from losing 2 starters. And a pass-catching group, as Jake pointed out earlier, which is probably the best in the Ballard era, that's got to be, better than it has been. So, and of course, second as a play caller falls into that boat.
Hey, Jake, can you please ask Kevin if we can get a Beers with Bowen before the start of the Colts season?
Oh, wow. Gosh, that sounds awesome. Yeah, I mean, honestly, we should just meet up at a nice local. Yeah, I'm looking right now. We could walk over to Fat Dan's. We could walk over to the Bulldog. We could, head over to Butler, go to Chatham. We could go to
Bulldog's got PBR on tap.
Hoagies and Hops. Yeah, we got
Hoagies and Hops is awesome. Hoagies and Hops is awesome. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, we got a lot of places. A little chili water action over at Hoagies and Hops. So, I love that idea. Now, Jake, we are approaching, I believe, the anniversary of your 50th birthday party, if I must throw that in there.
That is correct.
I distinctly remember watching that at the Big Lug and Notre Dame and Ohio State, and you were very allowing and accepting of me to maybe slide over to the other room to catch that on the TV. Your Tigers now are in that game. Are we liking Clemson? I'm seeing them as a popular national title pick here.
Here's the thing. This is where, Kevin, I think Clemson has a huge advantage when it comes to the national championship. And that is they open with LSU. I would like to think they're going to beat LSU because it's in Clemson. But even if they lose a close game there, I think the ACC schedule is such and is favorable as such that they can do what Notre Dame did a year ago and drop an early game and then put together a win streak that it's impossible to keep them out. And you just want a chance. You just want a seat at the table, right? And then you get in the playoffs and you see where things fall. They have a very good quarterback and they've got a very good defensive roster. And Tom Allen is now their defensive coordinator. So at the very least, we know that they will be excellent at snapping and singing. Right?
A 1, a 2. You know what to do.
And don't be relentless. I don't know. Your thoughts, Kevin. Notre Dame as well, starting out with Miami and then Clemson. Your thoughts?
I thought that was a slight dig you snuck in there at Notre Dame. That was not lost on me. Yes, I obviously two marquee games, not named Ohio State, Texas. I'm a little nervous about, first-time starting quarterback, Lloyd Carr's grandson, by the way. Never thrown a pass, and now he's going to walk into that environment. But I believe in pretty much everybody else. Honestly, sounds a little bit like the Colts. I believe in everything else, and I believe in Marcus Freeman. So got to split the first two, Miami, Texas A&M. Get a split, and then hopefully you'll be on your way to a playoff.
It was actually not a knock on Notre Dame. It happened to Ohio State, too. Didn't Ohio State have a loss, and then they, you knew that they were one of the 12, and so they got in anyway?
Yeah, I know. That was unfair of me. But
if you're going to lose, my point being.
I know your disdain for Notre Dame, so anytime you talk about them, I'm always thinking to myself, I know Jake.
I told you, Kevin. I told you the reason, the most unlikable thing about Marcus Freeman is I hate how likable he is.
Yeah. I know.
I really want to dislike him, and I'm like, man, he's just a cool dude. And they were fun to watch last year, and the game against IU was special, and then watching them after that was cool. I liked everything about it. But all right, your last weekend before the NFL gets underway, Kevin. Enjoy it. Appreciate the time as always.
Good luck to your Tigers. Best to you and Eddie. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Kevin Bowen joining us on the program. Now, my Eagles got to win. No, I'm sorry, they lost. My Eagles lost. My Eagles lost, but my Panthers got to win. I'm talking about high school football. Kyle Nederimp going to join us. We'll talk about some of the marquee matchups, and we'll find out what Crystal House is doing. That's my squad. We'll do it next. Now, Eddie, I have this deja vu. You ever have like one of those things where you're like, wait a minute, I not even that like having a deja vu where you're like, I've been through this before, but rather just a recollection of, I'm pretty certain that I remember this correctly, but maybe I'm wrong.
An epiphany?
An epiphany is more like a realization of a reality. This is like I think an epiphany, because I think this is reality, but I'm not positive. I recall at one time on Friday nights, you would be gallivanting around doing different high school games and play-by-play, correct?
That is correct.
And is that still the case, or has that now been usurped by the fact that you are the pre- and post-game host for the Indiana Fever, who have a game tonight against the L.A. Sparks?
That is currently usurped. So, I think my first game is in a couple of weeks because the Fever play tonight and next week on Friday night. So I think my first high school game will be on the 12th this September.
I was thinking that, maybe that was something that I was strictly clueless on, so to speak, right? Which takes us perfectly to our next guest.
Oh, I didn't have it ready this time, shockingly.
You didn't have ready would you like to find it, and then we can do that again, and it'll look like a well-oiled machine like we thought this out?
It's too late now.
As the producer of the program with the hotkeys that you push when I say certain things, I was thinking, since we're talking high school football and thinking about that with you, that maybe I was just clueless in that. Speaking of clueless, that segues perfectly to our next guest.
Speaking of lost and clueless, we bring on Kyle Neddenriff from the Indy Star.
Thank you. Kyle Neddenriff does, in fact, join us from the Indianapolis Star, and I'm sure he's thrilled that that's his new intro each and every time he's on. Is that right, Kyle?
I thought you were gonna make me say it again. I couldn't remember the. I was like, what's my line? Like, forgot my line.
We should have done that. That way, I have two different versions. I can.
We need you to say this again. Speaking of lost and clueless, let's bring on Kyle Neddenriff from the Indianapolis Star. Go ahead.
All right. Yeah, that's a good intro. I like that.
Okay.
Let's keep that.
Fair enough. Okay. Let's begin with this from a week ago. There were a lot of games that we were anticipating, a lot of big-time matchups. It is way too early in the season to say, separation Friday nights. But were there teams that jumped out at you, Kyle, and you looked at and said, you know what? I was intrigued. I wasn't sold, but now maybe I might be. These guys are somebody to watch.
Well, I mean, you could start with North Central probably from just from a standpoint of like, man, getting that first win in 32 games or breaking that 32 game streak. And I know that the games will get tougher starting tonight, but to be able to do what they did against Brebeuf last week, I think that was certainly an eye opener, and a lot of young talent on that team, and a new coach and Coach Kofer, and pretty exciting. And watching the fans come on the field after the game you could kind of tell it was just kind of a special night. But I would say too, like Carmel, doing what they did against Fishers, handling Fishers 49-24, and then going into tonight against Westfield, it's an even bigger bigger game, bigger. I will say stakes, because even if you lose, you don't really lose anything as far as what can happen in the future, but it maybe just gives you more of a, just establishes yourself a little bit more as one of those teams to beat, especially on the north side of that bracket where Westfield's kind of been the team to beat. So I think that was really an eye-opener what they did the first week, and then I'll be at that game tonight. I can't wait to see what happens there between those two teams, and should be a fantastic atmosphere out there at Carmel tonight. So, I think some of the teams we probably expected to win did, like, New Pal, and some of the teams that, we knew going into the year were really good. Brownsburg, although their game we didn't know, playing a nationally ranked team out of Maryland, to beat them, I think establishes them even more so as the number one team in 6A. But yeah, I mean, tonight we'll find out more. Sometimes you overreact to week one, like, kind of like the NFL, but I think tonight we'll find out. It's a really good slate of games tonight, so I'm really interested to see what happens with a lot of these big games tonight.
Actually, Brownsburg's got a big one, right? They have Cathedral tonight, don't they?
They do, yeah. Cathedral handled Ben Davis last week, and that'll be another great test. Two kind of I would say contrasting teams necessarily, but Cathedral's gonna, they run the ball really well. They're a good defensive team. Brownsburg's been kind of the more explosive team, so a little bit of a contrast of styles to some aspect there. But yeah, that should be a fantastic game as well. New Pal, Decatur Central will be a good one. Roncalli, Franklin Central, some of the highlighted games I would say from tonight. LN hosts Fishers. That could be a good one as well. Avon Ben Davis. So you got a lot. You kind of go down the list. There's a lot of good games tonight.
North Central, by the way, takes on Hamilton Southeastern. HSE's pretty good, aren't they?
They are, yeah, very good team. I would put them right up there. I think they're ranked number 6 in the state this week in 6A, and they had a kind of a knockdown drag out with Fort Wayne Carroll last week, and they won that game 14-7. But they're just very solid every year. They did lose some players up front. You lost some players to graduation, but they seem to reload. Michael Kelly's done a great job there, and that'll be a tough game for North Central, obviously, but. Just the fact that you take a little bit of momentum from kind of getting that first win. I mean, nothing better than being 1-0 after 1 week. I mean, so I think you take some confidence into the game tonight. Their schedule, North Central schedule, really tough here these next 3 weeks, but I think some excitement certainly for that program to get over that losing streak.
Rushville and Shelbyville, baby. Golden Bears going to stun the world. That's a program that's really struggled, right?
It is, yeah. I know they had some, some real struggles a few years ago where they were, kind of losing every game there for a while, and numbers were pretty low, and I know Michael Clevenger was trying to get it going there, and then they changed coaches a couple times, and Scott Fitzgerald's taken over, who was part of that program in different levels of football there, and they have got it. I wouldn't say fully turned around, but they've done better here these last few years, and have been able to win some games and get some people out. I know they had a couple of key injuries too last week, but they did get a win, and that's always again, nothing better than being 1-0 after 1 week. So we'll see. Rushville tonight at home, so we'll see if they can keep it going. But they at least have got that program where they're winning a little more than they were before, and have some better numbers out this season.
Kyle Neddenriep, our guest, talking high school football. Kyle, it's interesting to me. Brebeuf, certainly, I was talking to Dr. White, who was at the Brebeuf North Central game, and he was telling me that Brebeuf, their numbers were down. They didn't dress as many kids as they normally would or have in years past. There was a narrative probably 5 to 10 years ago that just the overall concussions in football, and I'm talking about at the professional level, that was going to have that with the rise in popularity of soccer, that we were going to start to see a decrease in participation numbers in football because fewer kids were playing it, and the NFL was then doing like the flag football deal or touch football and just trying to keep kids involved. Have we seen an actual decrease in numbers, or is it kind of case by case?
I don't think so. I mean, I know the National Federation puts out numbers, and they put them out recently. I can't remember what the 11-man football numbers were, but it seems like the conversations that you're talking about, I definitely wrote a couple stories around that time where the concussion issue was definitely a real thing, and it was worrisome. And I think you're right on the time frame. It seems like it was about 5 years ago or a little bit more, where it seemed like it was going to be a real issue at the high school level. I know, that was around the time too where the rugby style tackling was becoming more popular. Kind of started with the Seahawks, and some other programs were kind of implementing that, and that's become more common. And then I think it's a lot of the biggest difference I see, or when I talk to coaches, like, we just don't hit like we used to, and we're trying to be smart about how much we're doing in practices. And I think that's become just way more commonplace where, you're not going, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and you're just locking heads, and, kind of like we used to do. I mean, that was kind of the way you just did it for years. And I think coaches have become smarter to that, where you're just not doing that. You're not going, all out every practice, and so I think that has helped too. I think, and also the caps that they wear and the different helmet styles have helped, and a lot of the equipment stuff has helped, I think, too. So I think it's alleviated some of those. You're always going to have football issues with injuries and things like that, but I haven't, I think the numbers have been helped because people are more comfortable with the equipment and just practicing smarter and, doing things to kind of help the game along. I really worried there for a while where it was all headed with football. I'm a big believer in football's great for a school and for young men to be part of, and any sport really, but I think football's great, and I was worried it was where it was going, and that it feels like we're on better footing now than we were, and it's kind of case by case, I think, with different schools depending on just kind of your program maybe, or the people running your program, or kind of the economics or whatever where your program is where it's at, but I do feel like that concern with concussions is kind of it's not something you hear a lot
Right.
that much anymore.
Okay, let's get to, in conclusion here, a couple of my, each year I adopt a school, right? A couple of years ago it was Beech Grove. They got a big win, right, last Friday?
Yeah, they did a huge win. They beat Greenfield Central. That was one of the big I think surprises of the night. Yeah, they handled them 28 to 9.
A young team for Beech Grove, as I understand, so that's a good win for them. Shortridge is one that I have paid attention to in years past. What did Shortridge do? Do we know, or what they're doing tonight?
Yeah, they lost. They lost a close one to Purdue Poly. Purdue Poly had a kid get 6.5 sacks in that game, which is,
Wow.
he's going to break. I say he's going to break all the records. Lawrence Taylor doesn't. He's going to break all. If he keeps that pace up, he's going to be, setting some records. So, but yeah, Shortridge lost to Purdue Poly 6-0.
Okay, and then so they shut him out with 6.5 sacks. I guess you should. And then
Yeah.
my Crystal House. Now tonight, Crystal House. They were on the short end. I realize this is a group that you talked about that's been working hard, and they're kind of putting together a program there. They take on Noblesville Homeschool. Now, I don't know if that means it's like 5 kids that live in Noblesville that are homeschooled, or if this is a conglomerate of homeschooled kids that then happen to play in Noblesville but come from all over. But either way, Crystal House tonight trying to snap the skid, right?
Yeah, that team. A few years ago, I went out and did a story on that homeschool team. They're the Noblesville Homeschool Lions, and they play. They've been around for a while, so it's kind of an interesting, situation. It's homeschool kids, and they play a lot of kind of the smaller, I'd say, schools, and then play some other homeschool teams. I think they played a team from a different state in their first game. So yeah, they've been around for a little while, and they, like I said, they play some, kind of a mixed schedule. But yeah, the Crystal House will play them tonight. I think that game is at Crystal House, so that'll be an interesting game tonight. And hopefully they can. I know they had a rough first week, but again, yeah, like you said, they're kind of rebuilding a little bit, and it's hard to build a football program, but hopefully they can get things going there.
All right, Kyle, we will talk to you next week. We'll recap what happens this week, and we'll find out what's on the docket in terms of other games or players or 6.5 sack performances that you're keeping an eye on.
Absolutely. Appreciate you having me on, Jake.
Kyle Neddenriep from the Indianapolis Star. By the way, Taylor Tannebaum, we talked about Notre Dame and getting underway against Miami and the ACC slate of games. She's going to join us coming up 2 o'clock hour. We will get into that. But when we come back, what we talked about off the very top, 2 things here kicking us off in the weekend in sports, and a show announcement regarding Monday. We'll tell you about it next. I'm curious. Is it chilly in here, or is it just me? I know
It
that,
is.
like, outside it's a little bit chilly, right?
It is a little nippy in here.
I'm just saying, right? All of a sudden, I was like, wait, what happened here? It feels a bit chilly. Did you turn up the thermostat down? Would it be turn up or turn down? You turn down the thermostat, right? If the temperature goes down, it's down, right? We don't have a thermostat in this room, though, right? We're
we
at the
do not.
mercy of. Okay.
It's a good question.
Colts in action coming up a week from Sunday against the Miami Dolphins. This is the time of year where, in fact, hope springs eternal, if you will. There's all kinds of optimism for everybody league-wide. Here would be a question, Eddie, and that is, what fan base feels the worst about themselves right now?
New Orleans Saints.
There was zero hesitation with that answer. I mean, none. Zero, right?
I mean, what do you have to look forward to? I mean, it's Tyler Shuck and Spencer Rattler, for crying out loud. Like,
Tyler, what? Say that again?
Tyler Shuck.
Spencer Rattler I watched in college, and he's actually kind of a gritty dude. He'll drive you nuts. Tyler Shuck, I will admit, I'm not as familiar with. Can we play our favorite game?
Okay.
Guess the college.
I know exactly where he went to college without even looking.
Did you watch him in college?
Yes.
Did I watch him in college? Should I? Let me
Yes.
ask you this. Should I know this? Is this the kind of thing where you're going to leave and say to, like, Atticus when you see him in the hallway, can you believe that Query did not know where Tyler Shuck went to college?
Well, I figured you would know because he faced a Indiana school last year. I'm pretty certain of it.
So he is a rookie.
Yes.
Okay, on a 1 to 10 scale, this is how egregious that I don't know this off the top of my head. And I'm not going to be offended.
6, 7?
First guess, then. Is it a Big Ten school?
No.
Huh?
No.
All right, hit me.
He went to Louisville.
Okay, I should have known that. Yeah, Braum was a big believer in him, right?
Played against Notre Dame.
That's right. I should have known that. Did he play his whole career at Louisville, or was he a transfer in?
No, he was one of those like 6-year guys.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Like he's 25.
Where did he begin his college career?
Oregon.
Okay, I probably should have known that too, right?
And went to Texas Tech.
I mean, it's kind of ridiculous now, right?
He was at each of those schools for 2 years and then Louisville this past year.
I'm telling you, I'm still maintaining.
Oh, sorry, 3 years at Texas Tech.
So if I was, this is exactly how I would do it. I've mentioned this before. If I was a college football recruit, I say the same for basketball. If I was a quarterback, I'm the number one quarterback in the country. I'm a number one recruit. And I got a lot of respect for the way Arch Manning did it. Look, I'm going to go to Texas. If I got to sit, I got to sit. And, here he is now. The keys to the kingdom are his. But I would be my freshman year. Give me, Eddie, a school that is a 500 or slightly better, but you've got the impression they've got big-time NIL money and boosters with no morals.
Pitt.
Okay? I would have thought more like Mississippi State, but I'll go with Pitt. So my freshman year, I go to Pitt. I take all the money I can. Sophomore year, I throw my name in the transfer portal, and then I get Pitt to basically give me a money pit and give me even more. Up the ante, baby. But I stay at Pitt. Junior year, I then transfer to the school that needs an experienced quarterback to put him over the top. So in my junior year, I'm off to Syracuse or NC State. And then my senior year, I've now gone through summer school and other such things that I have enough credits. I'm really close to graduating. My senior year, I've said this before 100 times. I would do this with basketball. I do the same with football. My senior year, I take my college experience and I transfer to either Notre Dame, Stanford, Duke, or Harvard. And I say, you owe me $0, but you're taking every one of my credits and I'm graduating from your school. And I know people will tell me that academically speaking, you can't do that or schools wouldn't do it that way. And I got news for you. Guarantee they would.
I disagree with you, especially those Ivy Leaguers.
You're kidding, right?
No, I'm not kidding. I mean,
maybe Harvard but Stanford or Notre Dame.
it's apples and oranges here, but I know of someone who just graduated from Rose-Hulman, and nobody can transfer there because of prerequisites and classes and those things.
Understood.
Rose-Hulman's
Understood.
not Harvard, Yale, any of those.
Understood. But at the same time, a Stanford, do you believe that every player that plays football at Stanford or basketball at Stanford would normally have been accepted academically out of high school?
I think probably
Zero chance.
not.
Zero chance.
But you still have to have some sort of a baseline.
Understood. Understood. I'm just telling you. That's the negotiating that I'm doing. That's the way that I'm negotiating it. We'll get into, by the way, something happening tonight and a show announcement next. Cleaning notes here. Number one, Monday is Labor Day, and we will not have a show on Monday. As a matter of fact, the entire station will be off on Monday, so we will resume with you on Tuesday. Certainly hope that everybody enjoys the 3-day weekend, and whether it be cookouts, family time, whatever you may be doing, we certainly wish you the best in that. Number two, this is, we mentioned it yesterday, but it is officially today. Eddie, you, I believe, sent a text, which is greatly appreciated, but happy birthday to Shannon, right?
Yes, to your lovely girlfriend for the last, 19 years?
I think 20. We always forget. There was one year we celebrated twice. We were like, I think it's 15. Maybe that was last year was 15. So one of the years we thought it was our 15th anniversary on two different occasions. So I think it's 20. It is 20, actually.
She didn't complain about Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift getting engaged before her?
No. She was happy for them.
Good for her.
That's right. But happy birthday to Shannon. Also, the Colts getting underway a week from Sunday. You know, I thought about this yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
This time of year, there's a lot of nostalgia that takes place with the start of the NFL season and just the fall in general for me, because you think about all of the years that, especially in college football, where, every year, I love summer. I mean, I absolutely love it. And it is fascinating how the body and the mind both condition you for seasonal change. So as much as I love the summer and always long for, and every year in the summer I think to myself, this is the year I'm really going to take advantage of the summer and make sure that we eat outside more and, take walks on the Monon, whatever it may be. And then things get in the way and life gets in the way and you get busy, and before you know it, you think, gosh, where did the summer go? But once it starts to wind down, little things happen that then awaken in you the longing for or the excitement for the next season. And I start thinking about the fun of haunted houses in the fall and then into Christmas and, everything moving through as you wind out of summer. And that's where we are now because, school's underway and football's back. And then, as I always say with the NFL, you snap your fingers, and before you know it, you go from week 1 to week 11. It's just boom.
And then it's Mrs. Query's wet leaves PSA announcement.
That is around the corner, one would assume, right? We're probably a month away from my mom's famous wet leaves PSA. Thank you, Eddie, for that, because she will be on it, trust me.
I look forward to it every year.
But I thought about this.
It was a toxic mixture last year. What did we get this year?
They are toxic, she says. Very dangerous, the wet leaves. I thought about this, though, on the way in. For years when the Colts roster would be complete and you would see those battles and anticipate those things for, the 53rd spot. From the start of training camp, I always got a kick out of, and I always enjoyed, those stories of the undrafted, the Gary Brackett stories. And it does seem a bit surreal to know that this is the first year the first year, and I know that he wasn't around it from a work standpoint per se, but physically speaking, this is the first year that you have a Colts camp going into it and preseason games where Jersey Johnny was not here. And Jersey Johnny John Samasco lived for the Colts. And that he was such a lovable guy, and at times his eccentricities made him almost a lovable character, truth be told. But at the same time, I don't think anybody in the local media could deny Jersey Johnny's love and passion for that franchise and for that team. And he was so invested both emotionally and work-wise. I mean, a guy that moved from the East Coast to Indianapolis just because of his love for the Colts, and then stayed here and found his way into a radio show and as a fan, and became a trusted and knowledgeable voice about the Colts. And I think it's disingenuous when people pass away, when you say to yourself, like, I think of them every day. I mean, life gets busy. But there are times with people who leave a mark or leave a legacy where there are reminders of them, and this time of year for that, to me, is Jersey Johnny. And Jers is not a guy that I hung out with, but we were obviously very friendly, and I had a lot of respect for him. But he offered me the very first chance for me to do a radio show. I sat in with him as a guest host after winning a contest many, many years ago, and I never forgot that. But I also just had such an appreciation for his knowledge of the underdog on the roster, which was probably fitting. And in addition to that, when I talk about the things, when you turn the calendar and move it forward, I think about the radiothon with our friends at WIBC and the Salvation Army, and Jers was the guy that you always knew would cover whatever shift and whatever was needed to help out the less fortunate during the holidays. And just when I think about the fact the year is getting underway for the NFL season, I thought of Jers, and then I thought of just the fact that so many people, and Jim Irsay obviously there are going to be plenty of tributes to Jim Irsay this year as well, understandably and rightly so. But for so many people in this town, with whatever your favorite team might be, whether it's Indiana, whether it's Purdue, whether it's Notre Dame, whether it's Ben Davis High School, or it's the Colts, or maybe it's the Lions or the Steelers or the Buccaneers, whatever it might be. But sports are, for so many people, a bonding experience of family and friends to get together and watch games. And I would assume that the vast majority of people right now that are listening to my voice are starting out this year in football without someone that they have, for the better part of their lives, enjoyed games with, because they've lost that person since the end of last season. And so while we talk about the fun and the joy and the spirit of sport, I think part of the spirit of sport also is the camaraderie that comes with it. And so if you are somebody who has a loved one, a friend, a coworker, a competitor that you think of when you think of the football season, I would simply ask that you think of them right now and just give a little smile and a nod, knowing that, yes, in physical spirit, they might not be here with you, but that's what this is all about. And as we get ready to embark on another season, just know that you get to embark on it with those people that you loved, just in a different sense of the word. And that's what the whole thing is all about. And for the Colts and the upcoming season against Miami, I don't know how good they're going to be. I personally think, Eddie, that the Colts might be better than what prognosticators say. I think they're going to go 10-7. The problem is with going 10-7 is that kind of puts them in the same category that's difficult to get out of. You know what I mean?
Yes. And I think, Jake, I don't know if you feel this way. In order for them to go 10-7, almost everything has to go their way. Like injuries, health, all that stuff. Like, let's say they face, I don't know, pick a random opponent. They face San Francisco later in the year, and Christian McCaffrey's hurt again, and somehow Brock Purdy's hurt.
They've had years like that where everything went their way in that regard, right?
Yeah.
Where like all of us, I mean, you look at the schedule and you say, okay, Tua and Bo Nix and Cam Ward and Stafford and Geno Smith. You don't know.
Yeah.
Here's a good one for you. Who is Arizona's backup quarterback? If you had to guess, I don't even know. If you had to guess, who's Arizona's backup quarterback?
Clayton Tune.
Is that who it is?
I don't know. That's my guess.
I'm going to go with all the McCowns, I believe, now are retired. Fitzpatrick's retired. Minshew is in Kansas City, right? Carson Wentz is now in Minnesota.
Yep.
So we're running out of like the career backups that just bounce around from one team to the next.
I just looked.
Kenny Pickett in his widow hands got traded. He's with the Raiders now, right?
That happened during our draft. That happened during the fantasy draft Monday night.
Okay, so you have a backup quarterback for the Cardinals that, like, if Kyler Murray's not doing well on October 12th, this guy's going to play. Let me ask you this, Eddie. Is this a guy that has experience in the league?
Yes.
Is it a guy that at one time was handed the keys to a franchise?
Maybe.
What college did said player play from?
I can't even remember.
All right, so here we go. I'm just going to take my guess right here.
North Carolina State.
Oh, it's okay. Hold on.
Yeah.
Carolina State at one time, by the way, had like 5 players that were starting. You realize that, right? Carolina State at one time had, I believe, 5 different players starting at the same time in the NFL. But they had one. Is he a tall player? Carolina State had a really good quarterback about 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that was and he was given opportunity as a starter for like a year in San Francisco, I think.
He is 6'4".
Go ahead and hit me.
He would be welcomed in open arms here in Indianapolis. Jacoby Brissett.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I would not have guessed Jacoby Brissett. Should have known that right away.
And I said maybe to the franchise part of it because he was given the opportunity right after the whole Andrew Luck situation.
Here's what I know about Jacoby Brissett. What I know about Jacoby Brissett was I played in a charity basketball game with him during Summer Expo a couple of years ago, the Amp Harris-Reggie Wayne game, and I was on the same team as Jacoby Brissett, and he is a pretty good basketball player, but unlike the football field, he did not throw a single pass. He shot literally. Jacoby Brissett was like pulling up from everywhere. I mean, that dude did not, let me tell you something, he did not meet a single shot he didn't like. It was all over the place. But he was a good player. He was a good basketball player. Probably a better basketball player than football. Not literally, but who's the dude I'm thinking of from Carolina State? Like, this has probably been Mike Glennon, or John Glennon, something like that.
Yeah, you're thinking of Mike Glennon with the long neck.
Yes,
like a
that's
giraffe.
It. He was like a giraffe, right? Mike Glennon. That was probably like 10 years ago, right?
Yes.
I think I told you the story one year that Clemson got up to 8 in the BCS rankings. I was super excited. I was doing the show with Derek at 7 o'clock, and I just said, you know what? I'm going to go to the Clemson game. They were playing at North Carolina State, a Saturday game, 3 o'clock start. I drove through the night. I wore all purple and orange. I went and visited a bunch of stuff on Tobacco Road and then drove over to Raleigh. I got there a little bit late for the game. I walked in midway through the first quarter, and Clemson was down 23-0. And I had driven 648 miles. And all I can tell you is that the couple next to me were so stunned and empathetic over my journey that they actually invited me to stay at their house. Now, where are you staying on your way back? Well, I'm just probably going to drive straight. Well, that's a long drive and very dangerous. You should we got an extra room. It was literally like the guy from Cracker Barrel that they just brought back and his wife. Taylor Tannebaum joins us now, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so. She is with the ACC Network. Clemson, LSU, big one. Notre Dame, Miami, big one. Yes, Eddie.
Jake, when I was talking with Taylor to make sure she's all good to go, she goes, why in the hell is Jake screaming about Jacoby Brissett right now?
Why not?
So much changes, but nothing changes in Indianapolis at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, why not talk about Jacoby Brissett? Right?
Yeah, I'm always down for it. ACC guy, we love that.
Jacoby Brissett, like I said, so he's the J.R. Smith of charity basketball, correct? I played in a game with him, and literally, if Jacoby Brissett touched the ball, nobody else was getting it. That dude shot from everywhere. All right,
Sounds
Taylor.
about right.
I will lead it with this, Taylor Tannebaum. I will let you select Clemson, LSU, Notre Dame, Miami. You would like to begin by conversing about which game?
Well, we can start with LSU Clemson, considering I am in Seneca right now on my way to campus because we've got some television to do in a little bit. So let's start there, Jake.
I love, Taylor, when you drive. Now, I don't know if you're taking this path
I'm in the passenger seat. Full disclosure, I'm not driving. It's okay.
No, understood and appreciated. When you drive into Clemson, South Carolina, and I don't know if it's the route from Seneca, but I love when you get about 5 miles out and then suddenly the orange paw prints are painted in the middle of the road on the interstate. Love it. Love
It's
everything
the
about
best.
it.
It's the best. Lake views. What could be better? It is a beautiful day on the eve of some great college football.
Okay, that game, it is my thought and belief that while it would be fabulous if Clemson wins it, I think that if they were to stay tight with LSU and not get a win, they still would have opportunity because there's so much expectation of them to be able to, if they were to do what Notre Dame did a year ago, lose to Northern Illinois early. Taylor, my point being, if you're going to lose a game and you're hoping to get in the college football playoff, you can lose early and still have plenty of time to make up for it. Agree or disagree?
Absolutely. I mean, for Clemson, this is the standard for them. They open up with big games like this. You saw it last year as the perfect blueprint. They lost to Georgia big in that opener at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And then they lose a few more during the regular season, but they win the ACC. And they're favored to do again this year. So if they win the ACC despite losing tomorrow, it's not a big deal because they get that auto bid. And they'll have some other opportunities along the way. But certainly this is one Clemson would like to have. And I think for the league in general, for the ACC, it's a constant battle against the narrative of obviously being the little brother, and you have the Big Ten and you have the SEC, and then there's a large gap and there's the ACC. You need your top teams in this league to be competing against the top teams in other leagues. So I think while Clemson and Miami could afford to lose because they're going up against top 10 opponents, for the narrative of this league, I think those are the two most actually important games for them to win.
Okay, for Notre Dame and taking on Miami, and, obviously we know that Marcus Freeman's group is going to be very, very good. Quarterback question, I guess, because you have a new quarterback for Notre Dame. But Miami is a team, Taylor, that when you look at it on paper, if you're Notre Dame, you look at it and you go, hey, listen, kudos to them. They start out with Miami, then they got Texas A&M after that. They've got a sneaky one, I think, against North Carolina State, which you kind of never know. But let's begin with Miami because there are Notre Dame fans listening to the show. We can expect to see what in terms of what kind of team they're going to see in Miami?
Well, I think you can expect certainly an offense that's going to be flashy, right? I know it's a new quarterback in Carson Beck. It is not Cam Ward. Do not expect to see the off-script, heroics, magician-like football that you got out of Cam Ward. It's going to be what Carson Beck is good at because that's how offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson tailors his offenses. And look, I know a lot of people are looking at Carson Beck like he had a down year in 24. That 23 Carson Beck is still in there. So I think you're going to see an offense that is going to score some points. I don't think that's necessarily going to change. You have new pieces at the pass catcher position and in the backfield for sure, but the same standard is expected. I think it's going to be different defensively. They have a new defensive coordinator in Corey Heatherman who comes from Minnesota. So if you're a Big Ten fan, you might know a little bit about him. And what he did defensively for the Golden Gophers, they're hoping that translates down to Coral Gables. That was really Miami's Achilles heel last year, was defensively. I do think their strong suit is up front and that defensive line. And I think if you're a Notre Dame fan, that's the battle you're going to be watching is in the trenches because both of these teams are built from the inside out. Offensive and defensive lines, top-tier recruits, depth at both sides, and for both Notre Dame and Miami. So I think you're going to expect to see, if you're watching Miami, the normal high-powered offense you're going to get. Defensively, though, I expect them to be more sound. I expect them to be a little bit better at defending explosive plays. They were, well, I guess putting it lightly, they struggled in that area last year. So I don't know exactly what you're going to get because obviously it's week one, but I do think defensively they'll be a little bit better. But watch that defensive line, if anything, for the defense.
When you go around, Taylor Tannebaum is our guest, of course, at the ACC Network by way of WTHR Channel 13 when she was here in Indy. Taylor, when you have gone around and talked to different ACC coaches in your capacity and done the camps and all of the things that you've done, and I know that they are not by definition a charter ACC league school, but they play the ACC schedule. What has been the outside South Bend read or perspectives regarding Notre Dame?
That they're going to be good. And that last year for Marcus Freeman wasn't a fluke. He's built on every single year that he's been there. And I expect that to be the same every single year. I think you get general consensus around the league. They'd love for Notre Dame to join as a football school. They're part of the ACC and everything else, but I don't think that's going to happen. And I understand why. Money is certainly at the forefront of everybody's mind this day and age in college athletics. But I think everybody expects when you play Notre Dame, first of all, you circle that one on the calendar because that's one when you're in the committee room, they're going to be looking at because Notre Dame is one of the top tier teams in all of the land. The other part to that is, obviously if you're playing Notre Dame, your eyes are going to be in the spotlight You're going to be in a nationally broadcast game, so it's important for the league in general to make sure that they compete against the Irish every single time they play. Even though it's a non-con game, it's very much ACC adjacent.
Taylor, what do you most miss about Indianapolis?
Ooh, my friends, you, the people,
Mhm.
the summer and fall weather. Those are my favorite things. I will get a little bit of that now that I live in Connecticut, but I miss my people, man. I miss all of you, and getting to figure out who the Colts quarterback is going to be most importantly.
By the way, have
I
you
can tell
lived?
you who I don't miss, but I won't go there.
Okay.
That's an inside joke, right?
Have you, that's right. Have you, just out of curiosity, have you lived a winter yet in Connecticut, or when exactly did you move to Bristol?
I moved in January, so
Okay.
I lived half a winter. Yes, I did live winter, which was a really weird time to move. I would argue that Indianapolis is a harder winter than the Northeast, but now that I say that, it'll probably snow 100 inches. So.
My understanding is Bristol, Connecticut, in the middle of February, the sun sets at 2:30 in the afternoon. Is that right?
Absolutely correct, and that was the hardest part. It's like you're living in darkness at all times.
Okay, here's my last thing. I just saw the other day, Taylor, that one of the shelters here in Indianapolis was doing they were kind of at capacity for our little four-legged
Yep.
friends. And I know a
Hamilton
lot of
Humane,
people
I
get
saw it.
worried about it because they think about like the nature of dangers of dogs and whatever else. You are a dog rescue mom. Mitch is the best.
Yeah.
I wanted to give you 30 seconds to let people know that while there is a stereotype and you certainly need to be understanding and do your homework, that rescue dogs are the best.
I am a pit bull mom, and any dog that you look at a breeder, I promise you is sitting in a shelter somewhere, and probably somewhere in Indianapolis or the Indiana area. So if you're looking for a specific breed, don't go to a breeder, go to a shelter, because I promise you the love that you're looking for, you're going to find there. They're going to change your life. You're not just going to change theirs. They're going to change your life because they are looking for a home and they need you, and I'm begging you, I'm pleading to you. Hamilton Humane is where I got my dog Mitch, and I know you're a rescue guy too. Wonderful, easy process, seamless, and they will put you in the best position possible to make sure you have the best furry friend at home.
How far are you from Clemson right now?
We are in traffic on campus, actually just past the Esso Club.
Oh, my goodness. I know exactly where you are. Mad Mushroom Pizza coming up on the left, and then if you hook another left, you can go to Tigertown Tavern. I always get one beer before every game, but you can't do that because
Should
you
I
got to
do
be
one
on
in
TV.
honor? No. Here's the thing. I'm
Yes.
off TV tomorrow by
Oh.
3:30. Game is until 7:30, so I'm just saying.
Go down to the Tigertown Tavern and get one beer, and then there's if you go around in the back patio, there's a big tiger print on the wall. Shannon and I get our picture there every time we're there. It's tradition like no other. It's the absolute best.
All right, I'll send you some pictures.
All right, much appreciated, Taylor. Enjoy, okay?
Appreciate you, friend. Bye.
All right, Taylor Tannebaum joining us from the ACC Network. We come back. It's a Friday. You know what that means? It's the bottom of the hour. It is a feel-good, good for the heart Friday from Franciscan Health, and it involves high school sports in Indiana, but one field of play that actually hosted another field of play. Sounds confusing, but I'll explain next. Friday, you know what that means. Franciscan Health Feel Good, Good for the Heart Friday, where we see a story oftentimes involving high school sports, but just those that make us feel good. By the way, special thanks last week for all of you who made it possible to send Team Indiana and John to Minneapolis, help out with that for the Special Olympics. Debbie Antonelli was a big part of that as well, but he met his financial goal and will represent this state and represent it well in Special Olympics. And I'm thrilled for that, and I appreciate everyone's support and participation. Just a reminder, Franciscan Health, $49 heart scans, oh so important. If you are over the age of 40, if you have at least one risk factor of heart disease, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, obesity, if you're a current or former smoker, then it is really important that you get that heart scan. I would recommend it for really anybody over the age of 40, but that heart scan to find out exactly the calcium score within your heart, and then you get a heart health risk assessment with it from Franciscan Health, who is number one in the state of Indiana when it comes to cardiology by health grades, number one for interventional coronary care by CareChecks. You can always find more information at franciscanhealth.org/screening bundles. That's franciscanhealth.org/screening bundles. All right, every once in a while we talk about high school sports that are just a little bit off the beaten path, and that involves my next one. I don't mean because of the sport. I mean because they literally went off their own beaten path. So joining us now on the program, he is the athletic director at Carroll High School. That's Fort Wayne Carroll for those of us in these parts. Dan Ginder joins us after what has been a busy week, but what turned out to be a vision that then became a plan and then became perfection. Dan, thanks for joining us. How are you?
Well, thanks for having us. We had an absolutely incredible night, and we were just to celebrate Carroll High School, Homestead High School, out on the turf for something different. It was awesome.
Okay, so let's begin with this. What we're talking about is you guys just got done having a historic event, really, the first ever outdoor volleyball match in the state of Indiana, and you did it right there on the football field. And my first question for you is this, and that is, how in the world did somebody come up with that idea?
Well, we started the idea obviously came from University of Nebraska.
Right.
They did something a couple years ago and had 90,000+ out on their football field. And we started to dream a little bit then, and I never could pull it off. Didn't have the resources to do it. Just didn't pull the trigger. Then this last summer, Dr. Nelson, which is part of our sports medicine provider, Fort Wayne Orthopedics and OPS, and my assistant Randy, we're talking this summer. Their daughters play together in the summer, and Dr. Nelson said, "Hey, what about this idea?" And so Randy pitched it to me. I said, "Yeah, I'd wanted to do it a year ago. I never got it done. Let's do it." So Dr. Nelson and I sat down and came up with a plan, and we decided to pull the trigger and just make it happen.
Okay, I'm going to ask the dumbest question of all, Dan. You ready?
Yeah.
How does one get a volleyball court out onto a football field?
Well, they ship them. It's very normal in the club world. Every convention center that these girls grow up play on these mobile courts, basically, that are just large square plastic pieces.
Yeah, but that goes
together
on to an already flattened surface. I would think like on a football field. I know a football field theoretically is flat, right? But just the topography of it would be confusing to me. But then again, I flunked both geometry and any science class.
You're exactly right. We did not put it directly onto the turf. That would have caused there's enough sponginess to the grass, the turf, that would make it a little bit difficult and dangerous. So we brought in an underlayment, which we got from the Fort Wayne Tin Caps, a high A single A team here in Fort Wayne that uses at their park for concerts and foot traffic and things in their field. They donated that to us, which allowed us to put that as an underlayment and the court on top of that. So it really felt like the court was sitting on top of a layer of cement.
So now let's get to this also. So you go ahead and you get the court laid out. Then how long did you, I guess, go through the process of promoting this? Obviously, both schools were aware of it, but just so that, I would imagine this got more than simply the parents and a couple of friends of the kids on the team.
Yeah, we started in late May, early June with the details and working out the order, the delivery, the scheduling, all that type of thing. And as soon as it became in print that we were going to be able to do this, we just started to blasting the volleyball community, and our teams did a good job of spreading the message. We did it on our social media accounts, and just started to spread it within the volleyball community in Northeast Indiana, and it ended up being across the state of Indiana.
Dan, this past year, as a matter of fact, they have a new head coach now, what I'm about to mention, and I realized that you're up in Fort Wayne. Dan Ginder is our guest. He is the athletic director up at Carroll High School in Fort Wayne. The Indy Ignite is an indoor volleyball team, a professional volleyball team here in Indianapolis, technically in Fishers is where they play. And their inaugural season was just this past year, and I probably went to 3 or 4 matches. And when I went to the first one, Dan, the first thing I noticed when I walked in was I was blown away by the size of the crowd. And then I realized that the vast majority of the crowd were young women with their parents, high school to college age women who are volleyball players or love the sport of volleyball. And now this was their opportunity, right, to see volleyball at the highest level and to see role models and professionals playing. And it dawned on me then, Dan, and maybe I'm late to this party, but this is a very underrated state. And I know Muncie has a great volleyball tradition. Clearly Fort Wayne does. Kurtz Karai, I think at one point was up there. I mean, there's a great legacy and footprint of volleyball in Indiana. But am I correct in saying that perhaps we underestimate just how powerful this sport is for young people in this state?
Absolutely. And, it goes back many, many years to Coach Ball at what was IPFW and growing that program there. And they went to the national tournament many times, and he grew that in the men's program, and that's grown into obviously the women's across the nation at the college level is incredible. And now the viewership on ESPN and all the different networks with just volleyball in general is incredible. Big Ten volleyball is top notch, and you put out the other top 4 power conferences in that same category, and it's just the girls gravitate to it. It's a fast-paced game. It's fun. It is growing like crazy, and we're celebrating. And now the boys' sport is even growing now that it's an IHSA sport.
Okay, so last question is this. How many more of these are we going to do?
Ooh, it might be too fresh. I don't know. We've talked a lot about that in the last couple of days. It was an incredible event. I'm not going to commit today that it's an every year event. I don't know what that looks like. And it's a tremendous amount of work and details, and it was worth every ounce of it. But to guarantee we're going to do it next year, I don't know yet. I've had several conversations with schools around the state in the last 2 days that they just call and say, hey, we're interested. How'd you do it? So I think it's going to blow up in other places to give it a try. We're sort of proud and happy that we were first and it worked out so well. So maybe we might do it again. Who knows?
Listen, I know how much, I mentioned it, Loy Ball, for example, growing up near Fort Wayne, you mentioned playing in the early 90s there at Purdue Fort Wayne, and for people to be able to see that, and then he goes on, you see him on national teams and Olympic teams, you got to see it to be it, right? And I think that something like this, to see it means you can be it, and we'll see if we get other installments of it, maybe not even in Fort Wayne, but throughout the state of Indiana. But I think it's great, Dan, that you guys had that vision and made it happen, and it was very cool. The weather absolutely cooperated, but let's see if we can do it again, but I'll give you time to plan it out, and then we'll talk about it then. Sound good?
That'd be awesome. As soon as we put something on the calendar, we'll start praying for good weather. That's what we did for the last 2 months, was just pray for August 27th.
and it was a perfect night, no question. Dan, appreciate it, as always.
Thank you so much for having us.
Again, Dan Ginder joining us on the program. Franciscan Health, folks, you heard me talking about it, the heart scans and how important it is. It is so affordable. You can pay right out of pocket. It's not invasive. It literally takes like 15 minutes. And you simply find out if you had a family of heart disease. I'm telling you, you don't want to go through what I did. And we're trying to do everything we can to make sure that people are preventative about that. And I appreciate everybody that's reached out to me to tell me about the fact that they had a heart scan or had questions about it. A couple of people actually asked me questions, and I do plan on getting back to you tonight, as a matter of fact, because I'm riding down to Nashville. So I will get back to everybody on that. But just $49 for a heart scan at Franciscan Health, and you do get a heart health risk assessment reading with it. All of the information available. franciscanhealth.org/screening bundles or 833-238-0688. That's 833-238-0688. Beginning of the week when I had on Ed Carpenter, you recall, correct, Eddie?
Yeah, I remember.
And during that time, Ed had mentioned that because Christian Rasmussen had won the IndyCar race, that it was buy one, get one for the Peel pods of Java House.
Mm-hmm.
And I told you I'm not a coffee drinker at all.
Yep.
But I got curious and tried the Java House Peel pods. And since it was buy one, get one, and I'm a nice guy, I decided that I would share with you. And so, therefore, you made your introduction today to it, and you enjoyed, correct?
Yes, Jake. I'm typically not one that drinks coffee black. Like, I have to have some creamer and some sugar or something in it, and I don't have anything in this, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Pretty smooth.
It's very smooth.
It doesn't have like the bean taste, like of a coffee bean.
There's a small dab, just so you know, in there of Splenda, which is a sweetener. But,
then that's fine. I mean,
but you can make it. You can make it totally black. But yes, it's very smooth. And I did not realize this, but do you know that black tea? So they believe that black tea can reduce your chance of dementia. And that's my number one fear. I think most people, that's their number one fear. So I'm now going to be drinking black tea every single day.
Yeah, and it's good for your metabolism and all sorts of different like gut health.
Is it?
Yeah.
So that's one of them they have. So I ordered up on since it was buy one, get one. If you come to my place, actually, and sometimes you do when you take care of Boo, 9 pounds of black tea in there.
I'm waiting for the invite for the this quote unquote watch party we're gonna have for Shawshank Redemption.
I still can't believe you have not seen Shawshank Redemption. I know we've got to do the watch party. I get it. I'm telling you, it will. That movie will change your life. I think the thing that's going to be fun when I watch that movie with you is watching you try to act like you're not tearing up at the end. Because I will, and I've seen the movie 4,627 times. It's fabulous. What does your weekend consist of, or what games are you most anticipating watching?
So tonight, first and foremost, Jake, on the Fan, I've got pregame coverage for the Indiana Fever. They're in Los Angeles, a big 3-game road trip for Indiana that starts tonight. Then they will go to Golden State in a pivotal matchup on Sunday. That one is pivotal just because right now those two teams are kind of teetering with one another in the playoff positioning, and Golden State already has the head-to-head advantage over the Indiana Fever, so obviously if the Fever could win, that distances themselves from Golden State by a game. Tonight, Los Angeles team that's had their number as well. The Fever are 0-2 this year against Los Angeles, and then they conclude that road trip on Tuesday against the Phoenix Mercury. In terms of college football, obviously the big ones, Ohio State and Texas, LSU, Clemson. How does Fernando Mendoza look in game number 1 with Indiana? I understand it's Old Dominion, but how does he look?
A lot of hype on that guy, man.
Yeah. Tennessee-Syracuse could be a little bit of a sneaky good game.
Yeah.
Just because you don't know what Tennessee's going to look like. Nico Iamaleava with the late transfer out of there. So how do they look offensively? They're going to be very good typically on that side of the ball.
He ended up at UCLA, right?
Yes, he did. That's why I picked them. When we first had this conversation, a month ago before Dave Revson started helicoptering around the Big Ten training camps.
Parachuting in?
Yes, parachuting in, thank you. Of teams that could be this year's Indiana in the Big Ten. And I identified UCLA just because of the fact they got what appears to be a solid quarterback. And if you have a solid quarterback, that could lead to success.
I'm telling you, man, the one thing about UCLA, and I know, and I'm curious because next weekend I'll be at the Rose Bowl. I am very curious to see, when I go to the Rose Bowl, because I've never been to a game there. And I've been to Pasadena and I've been outside the Rose Bowl, but I've not been into the stadium itself. And I know that that's off campus and that hurts them a little bit. But if you drive one time through the UCLA campus and instantly you're like, why would everyone not come to school here?
Right.
That has to be the easiest recruiting sale of all time.
They play at 11 o'clock tomorrow night, so when you're up, Jake, you can turn them on. They're playing the Utes. Utah typically a solid team. They're very gritty, tough to play, and on Sunday you've got a pair of games. You've got Lenore Sellers, who's one of those quarterbacks that could be in Heisman contention, and in the top half of the draft this upcoming year for South Carolina. That's at 3 o'clock, and then Notre Dame, Miami on Sunday at 7:30. And by the way, I think JMV's ready if you want to chat with JMV at all.
John's on location today, right?
Yes. Mystic Waters.
Absolutely beautiful. I'm telling you, that is Brent Holverson is a visionary and put together something that, if you go back to, John, you think about it, 25, 30 years ago, that area where you are, like when we were in college, I mean, that felt like you needed a state map to get up there. Now it's the epicenter of all kinds of activity, and it is beautiful, and I cannot imagine better weather to order up for everything you've got going on than what you have right now.
Jake, this is going to be fantastic. And when you think about it, the last two, this is the third annual Labor Day weekend bender at Mystic Waters Campground, right off of I-69. The first two, it has been about 95 degrees. And I don't know if there has been more perfect weather. Now, do I want it hotter? Absolutely. But most people don't. And this is going to be awesome. And you're right, what Brent and Lisa have done with this place up here with all the cabins and how scenic it is, and what we're going to do starting out today and later on this weekend is fantastic. It grows and grows. I'll tell you another thing, Jake. Pendleton is outstanding. Have you been through Pendleton recently?
They've got a great park up there, the Falls Park, all of it's great.
I just drove through to go to a Needler's location to get cottage cheese, and I swear to you, man, I thought, wow, no wonder people want to live up in Pendleton. I'm not trying to be a Chamber of Commerce guy here in southern Madison County, but it is incredible. Pendleton is. I can understand why people want to come up here and let their kids go to Pendleton Heights, play a little hoop, a little sports, and have some fun because it's pretty awesome.
Kellen Dunham played there. That just played at Butler. There've been some good players that have come out of there. John, you have loaded up what for the big program today? And by the way, folks, you don't need right now, perhaps on a night like tonight. And if you're camping out at Mr. Rivers, you don't need your love heating just yet, but you may soon. So be sure to keep in mind getting your furnace checked at 317-353-2141. What's lined up on the big program, John?
Yeah, and thank you for the crosstalk with Love Heating and Air. We've got Don Fisher, voice of the Hoosiers. Game number 1 for the Hoosiers coming up tomorrow against Old Dominion. We will talk to Don. Hashtag Ask Pat. That's Pat Sullivan going to join us live up here. And Kevin Nealon, the longtime comedian and actor and good friend of Adam Sandler. Kevin Nealon is in town. I think 9 seasons on Saturday Night Live. He's going to join us coming up a little bit later on. He has a weekend stint downtown at Helium. He's a big-time sports guy. And from what they say, I've never talked with him, but an even better dude. But Kevin Nealon's going to join us coming up a little bit later on the show. And we'll get everybody right with all the sports this weekend because there is a blank ton of it, and we love it.
Didn't Kevin Nealon do Weekend Update?
He did.
Yeah.
He absolutely did. I kind of always wonder, those that did Weekend Update, what they think about the others that did it. You ever think about, because right now I think everybody thinks that Michael Che and Colin Jost may be state-of-the-art, but I thought Dennis Miller was state-of-the-art at the time. Everybody had an issue with Norm Macdonald, but when you look back on it, Norm Macdonald is probably now more popular at doing it than he was when he was actually doing it.
Every time I get on social media, there's a Norm Macdonald clip that runs through in my algorithm. Yeah, he was the best.
Yeah, there's no doubt. But, Kevin Nealon, he was in Happy Gilmore 2 here most recently. That came out earlier this summer with Adam Sandler, and Kevin Nealon's going to join us. He's got a weekend again at Helium Comedy Club downtown, which is a pretty good name, pretty big name to be. So we'll talk him up a little bit later, and all our normal guests up here too. This is always kind of, it is a sports, but it's also a leisure and fun, and there's a lot of stuff built into a Friday, especially going into Labor Day weekend on this show, and we enjoy it a great deal. We do. Now, you're going to Nashville, right?
I am indeed. On my way down. Shannon's birthday today. We had dinner last night, and then we will celebrate it next week as well. So
shout out. Hello, Shannon's birthday.
There you go.
Yeah. Is she going to come up here this weekend at all? I mean, obviously, no weirdness intended here by me, but is she going to come up here? Because we would love to have her.
She is definitely going to call in for the takeover.
Awesome.
I'm not sure. Here's the weird thing, John. I don't know if I should read it as she hasn't told me her weekend plans.
No, I think you're okay. Tell her that I'll have docking ready for her because I know she's probably going to request docking.
That's right. All right, John, enjoy it. We'll be listening.
You got, buddy. Thank you, Jake.
J&B's up next. I thank you for listening to Query & Company.